All right, I will call to order this special meeting of the Cotati City Council and the successor agency to the former Cotati Community Redevelopment Agency at 6:15. Can we start with a roll call?
Councilmember Savage,
Present.
Councilmember Sparks,
Here.
Councilmember Harvey,
Here.
Vice Mayor Lemus,
Here.
Mayor Ford.
Here. All right, we'll next move on to our land acknowledgement and pledge of allegiance. So I invite you to stand and join us if you wish. The city of Cotati recognizes that we're on the ancestral land of the Coast Miwok, who are the original caretakers of this area. We respectfully acknowledge the indigenous peoples who have been stewarding and maintaining a relationship on this land as knowledge keepers for millennia. This acknowledgement does not take the place of authentic relationships with indigenous communities, but serves as a gesture of respect to the land we are on. And now the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you all. So this is a special meeting, and as such, there is just this one public comment period that we're going to have now. So pursuant to California Government Code, members of the public wishing to address the council may do so at the beginning of this special meeting, and such comments shall be limited to the special meeting topic, which is a strategic planning session. So I invite let's start with Zoom this time. Any members of the audience on Zoom who wish to make a public comment?
Thank you, Mayor Ford. Speaking to our Zoom attendees, if you would like to make a public comment, please use the raise hand icon. Seeing no hands, that will end public comment on Zoom.
Okay, thank you. So we'll go to public comment in the room. I have a couple of speaker cards. First is Pam Granger.
Good evening, Mayor Ford, council members. Pam Granger, Chair, Tobacco Free Sonoma County Community Coalition. Last time I was here, you guys were doing goal setting, and I get to see the fruits of the labor on the backside, and it's really that to which I speak. Our goal is to reduce the harmful effects of tobacco on our community. We can do that best by stopping new people from starting to use tobacco products and becoming addicted, sometimes a lifetime of addiction. And the part that sort of fits our goal today appears to be what's going to be one of your goal 4, which would be to promote an equitable, compassionate, and healthy community that honors diversity as a source of strength. One of the things down under Objective B was advancing equity and health in the community. And so I was the one that gave you these lovely green sheets. And if you take a look at the green sheet, you'll notice that there's only one red section on the green sheet. These are, all the green communities have very strong tobacco sales policies, having tobacco retail licenses. And at this point in time, it's Cotati Rohnert Park as the only thing that hasn't been updated. But I have complete faith in you all along that line. Tobacco retail license is one way of reducing young people's access and availability to tobacco products. You've already taken great stands throughout the years to reduce secondhand smoke exposure in multi-unit housing and outdoor spaces and indoor spaces. Tobacco retail license is one that collects a fee annually for local control, because you can guess that the state doesn't make many visits to your local tobacco retailers. The county of Sonoma has had a grant that has allowed them to do some visits. And as I might have mentioned when I was here last time, I hate to say it, but some of your merchants 2 years after the tobacco, flavored tobacco restriction, are still selling flavored tobacco products. And I don't think that that's a diss on, in fact, I know it's not just something going on in Cotati, because the same thing has happened throughout the county. But when you collect a fee locally that pays for the education and enforcement, and when there's a fine that's strong enough to hurt, and when there's a chance of losing a license to be able to sell products, those kind of things help make, sort of put teeth where we're after. So we're requesting that you add a tobacco retail license and join Petaluma and Sebastopol and Windsor and the county and Santa Rosa most recently. And it won't cost you anything. We've got model policies and the enthusiasm to help you out. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I have another card from Ashley Portillo.
Hi. Sorry, I got the times wrong.
No problem.
My name is Ashley Portillo. I am a student leader and a nursing student at Sonoma State University. I am here today not only to represent my peers, but also as someone deeply invested in the health and well-being of our community. Vaping and electronic tobacco products have become major public health crisis, particularly among young people. At 21 years old, I have witnessed troubling prevalence of vaping and smoking among my peers and family since I was just 11. That is half my lifetime. I have seen devastating effects firsthand, students missing school, skipping class, and tragically losing their lives. At 13, 15, and 16 years old, I was not prepared to lose friends or peers to something so preventable, and no young person should have to experience that. Despite federal and state regulations, vapes remain alarmingly accessible to children and young adults in our community. Vape shops near both the university and high school campus makes it easy for students to obtain these products due to the lack of enforcement of tobacco laws. This accessibility and normalization send a dangerous message. These products are harmful and easy to get and socially acceptable. As a nursing assistant working in both a hospital and skilled nursing facility, I see the long-term consequences of tobacco and nicotine addiction. Young people who start vaping and smoking now will face severe health issues later in life, including respiratory disease, cardiovascular complications, and lifelong nicotine addiction. According to the CDC, and 1 in 4 cardiovascular disease deaths nationally are attributed to tobacco smoking. We have a responsibility to protect the most vulnerable members of our community. Your vision for Cotati emphasizes quality of life and community safety, but how can you have either of those without a healthy community? The January 2024 Youth Truth Survey data finds that 13% of Sonoma County 11th graders and 5% of the 7th graders are regularly using e-cigarettes. Additionally, an FDA study states that 90% of daily adult smokers started smoking by the age of 18, and 1,500 youth under 18 start smoking their first cigarette every day in the U.S. The proximity of vape stores to SSU and local schools, along with their willingness to sell to underage individuals, is fueling the crisis. This is not just a student issue, it's a community issue. Our health, our quality of life, our future depend on the actions we take today. I urge the council to implement stricter regulations on vape and electronic tobacco products by making tobacco retail licenses a citywide requirement. By taking these steps, Cotati can be a leader in public health, protect our youth, and improve the well-being of all residents. Change is necessary, and you have the power to make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you for staying around to get to this meeting. Thanks. Anybody else? Ms. Alderman.
I think it's quite the thing that there is a J.T. Savage council member placard already. This was all set up, and it gave favoritism to the planning commissioners, as I have pointed out, because were all the applicants supposed to read the agenda for the strategic planning? Of course, John Savage and Ryan Long would have read it or heard about it, but you didn't even consider the newbies like Sarah Sparks. You guys need to deal with realities. Instead of making comments like from 2009, and that's the people's will, that was totally, you don't even know. Sorry, I'm getting emotional. You need to do things for the city. You need to do things for people and have goals not set out by Damian Obid. He writes the goals, he puts them on, and then you guys pass them unanimously. Nobody ever gets anything. How about putting senior services, a weed abatement, or anything we've asked for years? But no, it's going to be whatever you guys, Damian says. And then you go to the Measure S committee and he tells them what they spent. They don't even talk about it. And then you sign off. This has to stop. There is so much going on outside of here too. You better have a big legal fund at this point. Huge. There are so many things that have been uncovered legally in the last few weeks that you're going to end up in federal court looking extremely bad and embarrassing the whole city of Cotati.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Barrett. And we're going to recognize that. Yes, thank you for the.
Thank you. Former Councilman Barrich. I'd too like to echo Ms. Alderman's statement that I was surprised to see Mr. Savage have a council member plaque ready. I would like to ask the council at this point whether they had a George Barrich council member plaque ready in case you decided to appoint me to the seat. And if no one's brave enough to show their hand that there's a plaque waiting, we're going to be doing a public request to see how many other plaques were produced, which is going to be very telling whether this was all rigged or not. Okay. So do you have them? Good. Thank you, Kevin, very much. I believe you. I believe Kevin. Thank you. So I've been to many strategic planning meetings over many, many years. And remember, we had it over at the community room across the parking lot, and the council was set up their seats in a horseshoe pattern with their backs to the public. Our seats were against the window and it was very difficult to hear. There was no hearing aids. There was no PA system. We made objections in the whole case after the city failed to apologize or make ADA accommodations, ends up in federal court, costing the city a ton of money. I would also echo that the city council does in the strategic planning need to allocate some money aside for serious legal funds. The insurance pool is not going to indemnify the city for intentional acts and discrimination. They will indemnify for willful, wanton, negligence, and accidents and so forth. But I've researched this already. So you're going to need, I would put this money aside in the city budget. You also need to budget for anger management courses because the city leaders seem to be very angry, holding grudges and so forth for political differences. You need some DEI training. We should put some money aside for diversity, equity, and inclusion because you guys don't have a clue about it, evidently. There's also no volunteer opportunities. We've discussed this recently at the council meetings. You're telling people there's all kinds of volunteer opportunities when there are none. You don't want volunteers. You've been shunning volunteers. And I've tried to make that point clear, and you need to put that on strategic planning. I've learned from city manager after city manager that through strategic planning, we're lucky if we're able to implement 5% of what you folks come up with tonight because of money, time, staff, and everything else. 5%. So it's usually a dream meeting of what would we like in a perfect world, okay? But maybe 5% you're going to be able to get done. I'm glad this meeting is in this room tonight. This is a big improvement with the PA system and being able to be recorded and so forth. Very good. I never got a thank you for that suggestion, but I don't get thank yous. There's no money in the budget for any improvements with the downtown specific plan. I've made that clear to you. Okay, so that's a sad tragedy. How can you refuse? I think you should do as I did and refuse your city paychecks as I did when you're serving on the council. You need to hold regular office hours at City Hall for walk-ins as I did for free. You need to, I was recalled for voting against higher sales taxes. And some of you walked around with your petition papers trying to get me recalled for these items, not receiving my paycheck, not taking them, and for holding office hours, embarrassing the rest of the city council evidently, because they didn't want to do it, and voting against higher taxes and voting against a DSP. Mayor Ford, you forgot to mention that, but that's one of the things you want to bring out. This was all the basis of the recall, and the fact that I did my job just shows that people can shine among huge adversities and mismanagement. People can shine.
Please wrap up.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks. Anybody else in the room? Okay, with that, we'll end public comment and bring it back to our one agenda item tonight, which is the strategic planning session. And so the goal is to provide direction to staff, if any, for the next 2 fiscal years, and we'll begin with a staff report.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. So can we get my slide show up, please? So the council, as we all know, recently held a initial strategic planning meeting where we went over well, a variety of topics, but one of them I'll just lead with. Next slide, please. Is the vision, and the vision that the council discussed is on the screen. It's also in the packet tonight. So the mission is more. So the vision is more aspirational, right? The mission is intended to be more operational. And then the goals that are proposed are really, when you see the underline on the words, those are tying to some of the concepts in the vision. So trying to tie it all together. And I'll get back to this, but I just want to just initially introduce this because we're going to talk more about the goals specifically and making sure the council's aligned on what these goals are. So we've had relatively similar goals for the last couple of years, and with the vision and then the mission tying into that, the goals have by content, they're largely the goals and objectives are largely the same, but they've been moved around a little. So we'll go over that in a bit, but I just wanted to introduce that up front. Next slide. So state of the economy. There was an interesting update that I'm heavily borrowing from an economist by the name of Christopher Thornburg. He was a UCLA economist, and now he's the head of economics. And as far as he gave some interesting context for both the U.S. economy and the state economy. At a high level, though, a lot of the point that he made was that there's a perception of economy, and then there's what's actually happening in the economy, and the two they're not always the same. And as far as the U.S. economy is going, it's currently in its 4th year of continued expansion, and we're seeing from 2022 through 2024, for example, the GDP has been between 2.5 and 2.8% each year. So it continues to expand, driven largely by consumer spending, which is a major part of the U.S. economy. So the debt to income ratio is the lowest it's been since 2003. So and there's a reason for that I'll get to in a minute. But foreign travel by people from the U.S. is the highest it's been since 2016. So a lot of discretionary money spent for foreign travel, a lot of discretionary money spent for restaurants, eating out. Restaurant sales continue to be higher than any point since 2016 as of May of last year. Gaming, Las Vegas gaming is another metric that they use to gauge like how much extra money do people have laying around to go blow on gambling, for example. And Las Vegas gaming revenue is much higher post-pandemic than any time back to at least January 2015. So And then lastly, foreclosures and bankruptcies, they're lower than the pre-2008 housing bubble as of 2024. So mortgage debt is as low as the prior low in 2003. And then the only kind of debt has been slightly trending up is credit card debt and auto loan debt, but otherwise debt generally is pretty low. And one of the things that's happened that's been, kind of an interesting sort of, I guess, retrospective is that when the pandemic happened, the economic impact, the estimated economic impact of that was about $1.2 trillion. But through the quantitative easing and just federal stimulus, a total of about $6 trillion was pumped into the economy. So the economic impact was about 1.2, and they basically dumped in about 6 trillion. And then it's just simple economics, just too much money going after too few goods, and that drove inflation up for a couple years. And obviously a complicating factor was supply chain disruption during COVID, which made some things more scarce as well. But the average estimate for household stimulus was about $50,000 per household, averaged over the entire country in terms of additional stimulus, and then an estimated $325,000 in new net worth per household. That's, I think, a combination of asset values increasing and that sort of thing. We are seeing the labor markets cooling a little bit, but the labor force growth has also been constrained. So that's going to be a kind of a long-term sort of headwind against the economy, is that if the labor force doesn't continue to grow to fill all the jobs that are being created, then that's going to constrain the economic growth. Another thing, this is more specific to California. Well, it's actually a national issue, but California is more acute, is housing availability. So if you don't have growth in labor to fill the jobs, and you don't have houses to house those people, it can have a negative drag on the economy. Home sales are down. There's very tight supply right now, largely, I think, because people that had houses when interest rates were low are locked into their sub 3% mortgages, and they're not really wanting to get out of them. So the existing housing supply is relatively tight. And even though they are creating new housings coming into the market, it's not coming in fast enough yet to meet the demand. And just a sort of a random little thing that I thought was kind of interesting, just about perception that I mentioned at the beginning. There was a series of surveys that were done between 2017 and 2023 about people's assessment of the well-being of the economy, of both their personal well-being, their perception of how the local economy is doing, and their perception of how the national economy is doing. And consistently, this is among all adults, consistently, people's perception of their personal financial well-being hovered right around 74 to 72%. So they generally felt positive about their own personal well-being. But when those same people are asked, like, how's the economy doing locally, they thought about 42% of the people thought that it was actually doing well locally. And nationally, they thought only 22% of those same people thought that the national economy was doing well. But it's, especially when you're looking at local economy, it's kind of a zero sum. I mean, if you're doing well, but your neighbor thinks he's doing well, and everyone else in your community think they're doing well, but they don't think anyone else is doing well. Well, so there's a disconnect there between the reality of the economy and people's perception of the economy. So it's interesting. It's just an interesting kind of psychology thing, because it can actually in the end drive consumer behavior, because the economy is driven largely by consumer spending. So some things that and I guess I'll just end on the U.S. economy. The biggest issues from an economist standpoint is the federal deficit. You don't hear a lot about it. You don't hear a lot of discussion about it, but that's the thing that concerns people the most, is the federal deficit. It's just simple. Revenues are not keeping up with the spending, so that creates deficit spending, and that grows the deficit. And also, tariffs creating tariffs and just general chaos in the financial markets that are kind of currently occurring at the moment. But those are some national issues that are of concern to economists. In the state economy, we have continued economic growth. I would say as a region, generally the Central Valley is growing faster than the coastal areas. And the housing supply is tight. There's a very low vacancy, as I think everyone here knows. California is more acute than many places in the US. Household sizes, thought this was kind of interesting, is that the number of people in a household, or the household size, is decreasing in almost all of the urban areas in California. And the economists just say people are spreading out. I mean, maybe that's part of it. Maybe it's there is a little bit of a demographic shift going on too, so that could be part of it as well. But looking at all the large metro areas in California between 2019 and 2024, the household sizes dropped by an average of around 5% over that time. And in terms of demographics and labor force, so in California, so generally the demographic ages 24 and under, we've seen a drop in the number of people. And then that same demographic across the state, ages 65 and over, has increased. So it's been about a 10% drop California-wide for 24 and under, and about a 30% increase in 65 years and older in the state. And so all the ages in between have been relatively static. There's been a little bit of change, but not a lot. Another thing that's by age, by level of education, what kind of on the macro level, what they're seeing at the state level is that people that are less educated, there tends to be drops in those groups in terms of the number of people in those groups. So less than high school, or some college, they've seen around a 10-ish% drop between over the last 5 years, actually. This is over the last 5 years. People with a bachelor's or more, we've seen an 11% increase in the population statewide. So, my assumption and what I've heard from economists is that it's just largely due to the cost of housing, and people with a bachelor's or higher tend to make more money, and so they're more able to afford that type of housing, higher cost housing. In terms of housing, so there's been some interesting trends. Just in this is residential building permits for new housing starts, and as you might guess, a lot of the increases in housing starts have been in the Central Valley and in Inland Empire in California. So the Inland Empire in Sacramento, as a percentage, saw the highest 5-year changes in new building permits. So Inland Empire had almost 36% jump in new housing starts over the last 5 years. Sacramento area saw a 50% jump in new housing permits. San Diego had an 18% jump. And then Los Angeles actually, over the last 5 years, saw basically a 7% drop in new permits issued. And San Francisco saw a 50% drop in new permits issued. So just kind of, those are percentages, but in terms of actual numbers, the biggest increase was, Sacramento, as I mentioned, at 50% over the last 5 years increase in residential building permits. And so what that means in terms of an annual number of permits is about 11,600 new residential permits issued in 2024. Inland Empire was creating more just housing by number. So even though their increase was a little less at 36%, the total number of units produced or new permits issued in 2024 was a little over 18,500, about 18,500 units. And where like Los Angeles, even though they had a 7% drop in the number of permits, they still issued almost 29,000 permits. So in raw numbers, they're still producing housing. And to kind of put it in context, sort of regionally, in terms of housing permits in large metro areas, some places like, so just think of like a Los Angeles is almost about 29,000 permits issued in a year. Denver saw about 21,000 permits issued in 2024. Miami saw about 22,000 permits issued in 2024. And then Phoenix, so the high growth areas, in Orlando is about 25,000. High growth areas were Phoenix, which was about 45,000 permits issued in 2024. Dallas, about 62,000, and Houston, about 67,000. So in terms of large metro areas, that's, that's part of the overall picture, is you're seeing some areas just producing in just raw numbers, more housing. And so that's part of the challenge we face as a state, is producing the quantity of housing to house, I think particularly our younger folks, and keep them in state. And then finally, I will just say that the takeaway from the economists were that that consumer demand remains strong in the short run. They expect the U.S. to continue to expand, the economy to continue to expand. The headwinds from an economic standpoint are the federal deficits and the asset markets being kind of a bit crazy right now. For California, again, this is this is Thornburg's, perception, but I thought it was interesting, so I'll tell you what his perspective was that California is some of the main issues with California is obviously housing supply, but that's not new to anybody. And just production, just basically production, as opposed to policies around affordability, but just supply and demand was his main takeaway. And also the tax system in California, just that it's not, he uses a term he calls California, he calls it it's not a high tax state, but it's a dumb tax state. From his perspective, California taxes the wrong things. And that's largely about the fact that California is, and actually the whole country is, mostly a service-based economy, and California doesn't tax that way. We still have a 1930s era tax system. Most other states have moved to a service-based kind of broader sales tax. And to kind of put an exclamation point on that, there was another presentation that I saw from another group, another economic group, and they had actually said that California has the second lowest tax, we're talking sales tax spread of any state in the nation. So in other words, sales tax is just as an example. We tax a very small amount of goods relative to most states. Most states tax almost all goods and services. So it's, it just hasn't adjusted with the shift in how the economy is today. So anyway, I thought those were just some interesting points on the state and national economy, but if you could flip the slide, please. So for the city of Cotati in our general fund, our issues here just locally are revenue growth, which is primarily about 50% of our revenue in our general fund, at least, is sales tax. And that continues to be flat. The other another 25% roughly is property tax. And that also has gone through the Prop 8 readjustment after the 2008 housing bubble is readjusted. There's this thing called Prop 8, which allows it to readjust to the prior assessed valuation, but that's basically, it's done. So property tax grows at a very anemic rate, and sales tax has been flat. On the flip side of that, expenses continue to outpace our growth in revenue, largely driven by a lot of it. Some of it's labor, but a lot of it's insurance, utilities. There's just a lot of factors that lead to it. So, as your expense grows and if it grows faster than your revenue, It just shrinks basically the amount of money that you have each year to save or do something with. It's pretty simple. In the water enterprise, our revenue continues to meet our operational expenses, but it's not yet sufficient for any significant capital needs. And as the slide shows, just so you know, the city owns 3 municipal wells. 2 of them are currently down for service. And so in the short term, at least, we expect some higher water purchases, which is more expensive in terms of our budget, the water budget, just to paying for the water agency purchased water. Sewer, on the sewer enterprise, our revenue is still on a multi-year trajectory to meet operational expenses. It still is insufficient for revenue for capital needs. We are in the midst of a rate study that the council will be seeing soon, at least an initial opportunity to see what it is and, weigh in on it, ask questions before we try to solidify it and then bring it back for real. So there's been a lot of this, there's been a lot of great stuff that under the leadership of the council that we've been able to get done here in the city. So for streets, we've over the last 10 years spent $23 million in streets, which is like pretty unbelievable amount of money. It shows a real commitment to getting the streets fixed and getting them to a state where they're much lower cost to maintain. And that's really the main point here, is that once you fix streets, the annual cost of maintaining them is much less each year. And then that's going to free up money in the general fund that then the council can use on other city priorities. So just as a percent, that's an average annual investment of about 22% of the general fund, which is a very large part of the general fund, especially for for any organization, but especially for us. And our pavement condition index, which is how they kind of a standardized methodology they use to measure the condition of the streets, is at least the last look was 76, which I say likely highest in the county. Just because other cities don't report it out directly, we have to wait for MTC to provide a rolling multi-year average. But as far as I'm aware, it actually is the highest in the county. And then our goal here is a PCI in the mid 80s. And then that gets us to a steady state of basically maintenance where we can, just reduce our expenditures significantly for just our low cost maintenance and doing other funding priorities. For parks, the council's invested recently $3.5 million in Cotati Park to totally overhaul that park. And we're in the first phase of the Putnam Park in construction and Sunflowers in Design. We have a $550,000 grant for Sunflower Park. And so that's finishing design up, and we expect to get that out to bid this summer. So you'll see that as a proposed project in the budget. And that's why, by the way, Sunflower Park kind of leapfrogged some of the others just because of the grant funding. And that happens sometimes. When a grant becomes available, it can sometimes accelerate projects in the normal queue of things. And then the Veranda Fletty Ranch Barn. So we've been working on that and expect a public meeting to start talking about some concepts there for the barn. And then the goal there is to be ready with schematic designs by the start of next fiscal year so that we can get into fundraising mode on that. And then in terms of city finances generally, so the city has had a balanced budget for the last 16 years, which is a huge deal and, very commendable that that the council's been able to manage to do that. It's definitely not the case in other cities. Triple Crown winner for the last 5 years, and the only city in Sonoma County to achieve that. And that's basically winning awards in 3 different categories. A budget award, a audit award, and our popular annual financial award. So you have to win all 3 of those, and in fact, each for 5 years straight to have a Triple Crown for 5 years. And then also we've been actively working on pension and investments to minimize expenses and improve returns, just all a way to more efficiently manage manage our finances so that we reduce our long-term debt costs and increase our ongoing investment revenue. Next. So facilitating housing, as I mentioned in sort of the macroeconomic discussion, it's housing, and housing, right, is what in polling of the community, what is important to them. And so the council's done a lot on this front, and we have the cottage housing ordinance now. We have a couple updates to our ADU ordinance to evolve with changes in state law. We have a senior housing overlay to protect some of our low-income seniors in that housing. We have housing objective design standards to streamline the development process for when we get developers through the door. Plex housing ordinance to provide more opportunities for multifamily type housing, and streamline that with the objective standards that would go with that housing type as well. We've created a Cotati density bonus ordinance to provide incentives for developers to develop the kind of housing the community wants, and then give them incentives for doing that. We purchased land at 120 East Cotati Avenue, which is the corner of Charles and East Cotati, and we're in the process right now. We're reviewing entitlement package from the affordable housing developer that's working on that development. We've been working on removing some of the obstacles to a lot of the housing development that was planned on 116, but hasn't been able to get off the ground because of the highway issues. And so we've taken the lead on that to remove that obstacle, so those developments can then move forward and provide a substantial amount of housing as well as other amenities over there. And then we had a project with the Sonoma County Housing Land Trust to do the Jamie Lane affordable housing project out there by the train depot. Next slide. And then just some opportunities just to consider as we, some of it you already know about, but some just to consider as we talk about some of our projects, proposed projects for next year. So transient occupancy tax, that's the tax that's collected. Generally, people think of it as a hotel tax, but really it's any tax on any overnight stay up until 30 days. So after 30 days, it's considered a rental, basically, like a rental that you'd think of when you rent your house out. You rent your house, you rent a room out to somebody, but TOT would be anything less than 30 days. So hotels are the most common thing that fall into that category. Another thing that we currently don't allow are vacation rentals. There is a potential opportunity there for some limited discussion on that, because that would be a TOT source if there was interest. Cannabis, I'll just point out, no proposed really changes there at the moment, but the first lounge did have a soft opening, our first cannabis lounge, and I expect in April they will actually do an official opening there. So look for that in the near future. And then tax increment mechanisms to explore. We've talked a little bit already about EFIDs, but there's others as well. So when we brought it up, it was that discussion was postponed for strategic planning. So here we are tonight. Just wanted to put that on everyone's radar. But there's a lot of different, there's several different versions of tax increment financing that could be used that are, they don't change anyone's taxes or tax rates. It's just a back of the house mechanism for sharing property taxes with the county to do infrastructure projects or housing projects that provide mutual benefit to both entities. And then as far as community development, we've been focused on our priority development areas. This is the Highway 116 corridor, downtown area, Santero Way Specific Plan area. And one of the things that's become apparent is I talked about the housing. Actually, Noah and I were talking just recently about another project that just came in, and there's still, because of years and years and years ago, I'm talking like decade or more ago, Cotati had a reputation of being a hard place to develop in, and we've done a lot. I would say probably as much or more than any community in Sonoma County around housing and a lot of development. And I think it's time to get out there and tell people about it, make a real concerted effort. So that way people aren't just running off of what they heard from their kind of the conventional wisdom in the development community from someone that tried to develop something 20 years ago here, but actually get out there and let them know how things really are in Cotati. So you'll see in some of our subsequent sort of work plans that there's some proposed time to get out there and start, sharing kind of what we've been working on here in Cotati. Next slide. So I thought the council might find this interesting. Just from the last workshop we did, there was a chart, like a generalized chart that was shown about how people spend time and how much discretionary time. And that was, I know some council members had a question about that. So, we went into our timesheet system and just produced the actual time from last year, last 12 months. And you can see the day-to-day is the blue and paid time off is green, which I think in the other chart was probably just rolled into the day-to-day, the one that the consultant presented. But this is holidays, vacation, sick time, kind of everything, right? And then the orange, there's a thin slice for regional representation, and then the orange is available project time. So when we look at our time card system over the last 12 months, that's how much time was spent on projects as opposed to other kind of day-to-day stuff. So the consultant wasn't far off, I guess is the point. It's pretty close. Next slide. All right, so just on the last workshop, these were the council's main priorities, and housing and development in the neighborhoods, right? That was the category. So the community survey that we talked about, this is the polling that has been done of the city residents, is that there's a focus on housing. And just if anyone's watching that doesn't know what that polling was, it was a designed poll to look at what people's priorities were in the community. And it was housing, and it was housing, and it was housing, and nothing else was even close. There's some other things, but it was basically housing. So, and the council had expressed, concerns about the number of people who work in the city but can't afford to live here, right? So that's very consistent with what we heard in the polling as well. And in addition to the housing, sort of the housing need conversation, there was also it was a related conversation about creating neighborhood identities and trying to, part of it is creating places for neighbors and neighborhoods, but also creating places for neighbors to get together and trying to provide opportunities for that. And so that can run the gamut from, things like, facilitating, making it easy for people to have block parties if they want to get together with their neighbors, to things like placemaking, like physical signage or something like that, to call people or call out places that people colloquially already call their neighborhoods, but maybe there's no, sign up that says that. Next slide. So the next kind of group of things, this was second tier, obviously still important, but the second tier in what we talked about in the last meeting, and that's economic development, broadly speaking, and infrastructure. And supporting local businesses and more broadly, supporting a thriving business sector in the community was very important. And geographically, I guess more specifically, a need to support businesses in the industrial area. And when I say industrial area, I mean basically along Redwood Drive on the west side of Highway 101, north of Hellman Lane, basically Lowe's up to the city limit. That's what we consider the industrial zone. That's the zoned area. And then on infrastructure, just continue to support our infrastructure needs. So on the roads, obviously there's been a huge investment by the city council on the roads, and just making sure we maintain that, ideally improve it, but certainly maintain it at the very least, so that we don't go backwards on that. And then in making sure we just continue to work away at any deferred maintenance, and And there was deferred maintenance, and then generally alternative energy, and then other, types of projects to meet some of our climate goals. And then community building and community engagement. I mentioned kind of a little bit about that in terms of placemaking and, neighborhood events. But just basically trying to foster, volunteer activities, try to grow the next group of leaders. And so some of that, like, we've been doing in addition to like the creek cleanup we did last year, and we helped, bring volunteers in for that type of event. We also are, have been working jointly with Roanoke Park on the leadership group that you heard about tonight. Some of our residents are in that leadership group, and opportunities like that to engage the community, kind of engage, so they can engage with each other, whether it's events in La Plaza or just in their neighborhoods, but then also get them to engage with our city and hopefully grow the next generation of leaders. And then last but not least, and certainly I don't want to suggest that this is a lower priority, but continuing fiscal responsibility and a balanced budget, and then connectivity. So that's a high-level summary of what we all talked about at the last strategic planning workshop. Next slide, please. Okay, so in the council packet, there's a variety of things. So there are, just as a way of orientation, we have the status of, well, first of all, we have the different categories that staff spend time in. So you can just see kind of where our categories are. And you should just know that we did a renaming of categories. So next year, they're going to be a little bit different than this year to try to better capture some of the things that we spend time on. Really was just try to make sure that ideally not too much time was lumped in any one category, so we had some visibility on what those main things were. And if we were categorizing things where people spent hardly any time getting rid of those categories, but it was basically a reorientation. So you'll see that in the packet. And then you will also see our departmental worksheets, which has the, let me get to that. It has the status of our current work plan projects for the current fiscal year. And then you will see that projects that were added during the current fiscal year are shown in red font. And the projects are color-coded and indicated by priority, 1, 2, and 3. Any new projects that were added that the council hasn't seen, but they're, for consideration for tonight, have the label of new under the status column with a proposed priority. And in terms of the general process, I would just propose that we try to pick the highest priorities by tonight, and anything that ultimately gets bumped down in priority that we don't have time for in the current year, there's always, because we're doing a 2-year budget, there's year 2, so we could push them into year 2, but still have them on the list. And then we will be revisiting this list once we get into this fiscal year. Certainly at a minimum, we're going to be revisiting this list at sort of the mid-year check-in, kind of a similar time as we're talking about this today, and then readjust any goals in any corresponding budget that we may need to do. So it's a 2-year budget, but it doesn't mean that you have to choose everything you want to do now and then, forever hold your peace until the 2 years are up. It's just an initial, where do we think we want to spend our time in year 1, and then by priority, year 2. And then, we will be readdressing this again, certainly at the mid-year of next year. And so at a high, so that's kind of an overall orientation at a high level. And I'll just stop there to ask any questions. And then my plan was to to go back into the goals and objectives and just, the mission goals and objectives, see if there's consensus there, and then we'll move department by department through the different worksheets. So I'll stop for the moment.
Okay, that sounds great. So sounds like, are there any questions for Damien about the presentation? Go right ahead.
Let's talk something about volunteers.
Mic on.
I'm sorry. You were talking about the first tier, second tier, third tier priorities. Did you talk something about volunteers? Was that on one of the priorities?
Just community engagement generally being,
Okay, I see that.
not volunteers explicitly, but just trying to create more opportunities for the community to engage with themselves, basically, whether it's an event.
That's where that would go, would be in that section there. Okay,
So,
good.
yeah.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, so let's go ahead. Oh, Councilmember Harvey.
It's probably because the writing is so small. Is the tobacco retail license on any of these lists? I didn't see it looking really quickly.
It is not, I mean, there's a comment letter in the packet, I believe, and
Right.
as well as the comment tonight, but it's not in the party list, no.
So we would have
We,
to,
we would add it when we get to looking at the
Got it.
projects, for sure.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks. And so I think our next task is to look through the goals and objectives sheets. There's, the first page is the 2024-25, our current goals and objectives, and you can compare with the proposed 25-26 goals and objectives to incorporate some of the changes we talked about at the last workshop. So if you're looking for any feedback about that, or did you have anything more you wanted to say about it?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to make one comment in case you're looking at the packet and you see a couple things highlighted and you wonder why they're highlighted. Just because so basically this is reoriented more under the vision, that we had all discussed. But housing and climate change were previously higher goals as opposed to objectives. So I just wanted to, I only highlighted it to just point that out. They're still in the overall structure, but just something to consider as you think about the overall framework.
So comments about the draft goals and 25 to, and we should probably call this the 25 to 27 goals and objectives, right? Comments on those. Councilmember Sparks.
Yes, thank you. I appreciated the little tweaks to the goals. I think and objectives, I think they look good. My one comment that I'd really like to request strongly is that we seem to get like abbreviated versions of these goals showing up on various documents. And I'd like to see us kind of, whatever we come up with tonight, place it verbatim somewhere that lives on the website. Because to actually find them now, you have to go into packet PDFs and hunt for them. So I would really like to see us get these up somewhere prominent and then sort of stop using the short ones that we know are shorthand for the real goal, but I'd love to see in future budget documents and things like not all the sub objectives, but the actual goals in their full text somehow.
Yeah. To that, I will add one of the things that that we plan to do this year, which is a little different than prior years, is once we're through this process tonight, creating basically it's a one-page strategic plan. So what that looks like, just so you kind of can frame it up in your mind, is it'll have the vision, it'll have the mission, it'll have the goals. Vision, mission is kind of overarching statements. Think of it in tabular format. So you have goals on the left side, and then the goals lead to objectives, next column over, right? Verbatim. And then when we get it to the departments, you'll see the project sheets. So the projects that implement each one of those objectives. And then finally, on the far right, we want to develop some metrics that measure our progress to those goals. So I think that answers the question, but that's just another layer that we plan to include verbatim so that it's both in the budget, but also on the website. Verbatim.
That sounds great. Thank you.
Thanks. I also want to point out so the mission that is on a slide was is a proposal that we should also talk about in this same discussion. So that was back
Yes.
several slides back. It's building a vibrant and sustainable city for current and future residents, businesses, and visitors. And so we can include that in this discussion about these goals and objectives, because that's a new draft that we didn't approve last time. So other comments about either the mission or the goals and objectives? I'll give you a minute to peruse them a bit. Go, Councilmember Sparks.
Just had a quick comment about the vision, and just the word become. It's always tricky because it sort of implies that we're not those things already. So maybe be instead of become.
Yeah, now that's a tricky one because we actually did vote on and approve
Oh,
that
did we?
vision last
Oh,
time.
okay. Well, never mind then. That's fine. I can live
It's
with
the
that.
mission that we didn't
It's the
yet.
mission. Okay.
We could revisit the vision though at some point if we wanted. Go ahead.
I'd like to know from the city manager, we had talked in the last meeting, strategic planning meeting about the mission being what the staff can kind of point to as their as sort of guiding their day to day. And do you feel like the mission is helpful for you in that capacity, or it seems sort of similar to the vision, very similar to the vision. So I'm wondering if there's anything in there that would make it more useful from that perspective.
Yeah, I was, I mean, I think so. I think right now we don't really have an explicit one anyway. So I think this is certainly a good start. For missions, I always try to keep them as, you don't get extra points for more words. It's the opposite. You want to make it as brief as possible. And it seems to me that the mission encapsulates the big picture vision, but is short enough that I think people will remember it at a staff level. So it may not be the end all be all. We may in a year or two revisit it and have some brilliant ideas, but right now I think it's certainly much better than we currently have, and I think it's short enough that it's memorable by our employees.
Vice Mayor Lemus.
Yes, I like the proposed mission. I feel like it says the what, the who, the when, vibrant, sustainable city, current and future, and then the who, the residents, business, and visitors. I think when we're looking at it, we kind of were going all over the place and adding more and more, but I think it's very kind of concise, and it hits, the mission of what we, want to say. Yeah, so I appreciate that. I like it.
I had similar thoughts. I think it's good. I like it fine. And I think the underlined words in your proposed goals right under it on the slide are good sort of sub reminders of what we mean by those things. So it's not just even put together. It's not a bad, I'm not proposing we make inspirational posters to put on the wall, but those words would not be hard to kind of keep in mind as, is this helping us be more resilient or create more connections or make things more vibrant or help things be more inclusive. So, Vice Mayor Lemus.
I was just going to tag on to what Councilmember Sparks said. If we look at the vision should be Katati is connected, because even though it's not, everything there to the highest standards that we want, the vision would be what we envision it to be in the future. Katati is a connected, resilient. Even though we're not there, that's our vision. That's my thought. Yeah.
All right. So the vision isn't on the agenda today.
Oh,
You can
okay.
put it on a future agenda if you want.
Okay, thank you.
Is that okay? Is everybody okay with us moving on for now? I agree. It's fine to revisit it, but I wonder, what about goals and objectives? How are we doing on those?
I think, not only be too wordy, but if there was any more, around vibrancy and the connection, maybe something that's a little more tangible.
In the mission?
No, in the goals.
Oh, in the goals.
Yeah. Because we have vibrant
in the mission and promote vibrancy of the community, but maybe there's another word that gives a little more granularity to that.
And that goal is kind of expanded on the draft goals and objectives. So maybe looking at that draft, looking at the goals there might give us an idea of what to pull up into the, headline of the goal. So the objectives kind of list some vibrancy. There's a lot of objectives under vibrancy. Oh, one,
Oh,
Vein.
yeah, plus the housing got pulled into there. There's so much overlap with something like, goal 4 or even goal 2, the community connections and participation.
yeah, and I feel like there's not one consistent kind of thread through that first objective. We've got the financing funding, financing, the economy.
Infrastructure is a nice word that
Infrastructure.
resonates with a lot of people.
Mhm.
And housing, with it just being such a huge priority for everyone. I mean, those might be two good words to somehow work into that first goal around infrastructure and housing. But I don't want to get too granular if that's not the place to get.
No, it's fine. We want to finalize wording tonight. So,
When I see the word vibrancy, I think like street parties, happy hour,
Yeah,
that kind
right,
of stuff.
right.
And that's definitely not what this means.
that's more under the community connections and
Yeah,
participation
So
one,
I'm
right?
thinking, but maybe I'm the only one that thinks like that.
I think I'm looking at the other goals and they're also very short and succinct, right?
Councilmember Sparks.
Well, I noticed that the managers suggested we have no more than 5 goals, and we currently only have 4. So if we want to take full advantage of our allotted goals, we could, we could split this in 2. It seems to me like there's 2 threads running through this. One of those is fiscal sustainability and infrastructure, which seem to go together to me. And then the other thread is like service and opportunity for residents. So there's an objective about fast, helpful customer service, housing opportunity. So perhaps we could have the first 3 objectives in one goal that's about fiscal sustainability and infrastructure.
So
And
the old name was long-term vitality that
Mhm.
housed all those fiscal goals.
Mhm.
Fiscal objectives.
One word I see in some of my readings about urban situations is livability. That's kind of a broad word to house those things under.
Housing which things under the second set or
Um,
the first set?
The housing, the infrastructure, those type of hard things that you can touch.
so maybe sorry, can I?
No, it's an
Councilmember
even-
Sparks.
Maybe objectives B and D could go into a livability goal that would encompass. I'm sorry, I'm looking at. Yeah, that would encompass infrastructure and housing. And I'm not sure that might be one way to split it up, but the other's in a different goal.
And then potentially A, C, and E. So, yeah. Yeah, I guess I'm kind of agreeing that vibrancy doesn't fit these objectives to me as a term. Vitality fits many of them, the old term. What do people think about that idea of splitting objectives B and D off into a new goal that I think you might have had a name for between the two of you that you could repeat maybe?
Livability is a term I see used.
Yeah. And then do B, D, and E go together in a goal? Oh, I see.
Yeah, I think that they could. Those are all focused on the experience of people who are interacting with the city in some way. And then A and C could go together in more of a fiscal oriented goal.
I see. So B is actually two objectives right now. It's got the balanced budget and it's got excellent public infrastructure. Right? And so the infrastructure one, is that the piece you meant to go with the housing opportunities, and balanced budget would go with strong city finances and?
Yes, and perhaps the part 3 of goal B, pursue grants and alternative funding sources, if that were moved into objective A, about city finances,
Yeah, right.
then B could be excellent public infrastructure.
Where does balanced budget for long-term sustainability go? Is that's maybe a sub of strong city finances,
Yeah, that
right?
seems to fit better with
Yeah.
objective A.
Oh, yeah, I think there's a bit of a typo there.
Yeah,
It
right,
didn't get carried down.
right.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah, I think literally it was supposed to be in objective A.
Yeah, I mean, another, word that is kind of throughout some of these documents is, sustainable, like a sustainable community or sustainable infrastructure.
Would it be, just from a process standpoint, perhaps we could give this resorting direction to staff and bring it back with our general fund
That's a good
budget
idea.
approval for just final approval, so we don't have to do wordsmithing here?
Yeah, I think we're probably getting too deep into the wordsmithing. Is there general agreement about splitting goal 1 up into 2 goals? One that's about livability and infrastructure, and the other one that's about financial stewardship, basically. I think that captures, with that split, maybe the fast, helpful customer service goes with the livability one, but you can put it whichever one you want, I suppose. What about the other 3 goals? Are we good with those and the objectives under them? I would say on number 4, I think I wrote the first draft of that sentence some years ago, and it's probably got too many adjectives in it now. So maybe that's where vibrant goes instead of equitable, compassionate, and healthy, or something like that. Because the honors diversity is a source of strength phrase I like, and it means to me we don't need the word equitable in there. But I don't know what people think about shortening that statement.
I really like that statement that you wrote, and I don't want to change it.
One that's in there now, okay?
It's a strong statement. I
But
like
I'm
it.
open to having my mind changed, but that's my initial thought.
That's fine. I like the word vibrant, vibrancy, but it doesn't fit in the goal it's in, so I was trying to find a place to put it. I don't need to put it there. People okay with those goals and objectives? So
Right.
with the change to number 1, we'll ask Damien and team to take it back and rework that into 2 goals.
Yeah, so goal 1 goes into 2 goals. One sort of, I guess, generally categorized as a livability goal, and the other as a more financial stewardship type goal.
Yeah.
And then resort things underneath those.
Yeah, and livability and infrastructure were 2 words that we were all saying for that first one.
Okay. So one other thing too, so I think I'm good with that direction, and I'll bring it back at the general fund study session. Council's okay with that? Yeah. Before we move on, I was looking back at the vision. So I think, so I think maybe what's kind of the comments that we heard here tonight is I think what was discussed was the vision was Cotati is a connected, resilient, right? But the vision's supposed to be future oriented. So I think it got flipped to the like kind of the future tense to will become. So I think we still can have that conversation if we want to talk about, you know.
All right, now that we're
Sorry.
gotten through the goals and objectives. if
Yeah.
That's fine with me. If we want to open up the vision, that's fine.
Yeah, but I think, so last time the council all spoke about it, I think the statement that was on the board was Cotati is a connected.
Oh,
So
well, then I misspoke. I was wrong.
I think it might,
Yeah.
based on my recollection.
Would
So
something like continue to build or something like that be appropriate? Like we
Well,
are this, but we want to be more this?
Well, the thing is, a vision is a statement of a vision of what you will be in the future, not a becoming statement. So, or, yeah, I don't know. Go ahead.
Instead of become, could we just say will be? Because that doesn't imply that it's not already, it's just what it will be.
Right. Other thoughts about that?
Because I thought just Cotati is, and that way it's kind of like we can dream that we are, which is our vision. So Cotati is a connected.
Yeah,
was-
I-
But
I thought-
that makes it not a vision statement. It makes it a claim.
A future claim. Hmm.
I don't know. That's my reaction to that. Is that would come across as, sure you are,
Mhm.
or whatever, not, it doesn't sound aspirational. It sounds like a claim to me.
What did you say, Laura? Your word?
Will be.
Yeah.
And I have heard people do their visions in the present tense,
Mm.
but in the context of like vision : and then with the present tense,
Mhm.
I've seen that before.
Yeah. Mhm.
I'd be okay either way. I'll feel you. How do you feel, Councilmember Harvey? You're staying silent.
You guys are all over the wordsmithing, so I'm not going to throw
Well, what about
anything in there.
will be versus is?
I like will be. Because is implies we're already there. It feels kind of past tense to me.
What about you, Councilmember Savage?
I agree.
You're on the will be side of things? All right. Can you live with will be? Okay. We might be there next week and we can change it, right?
We might.
All right. Okay. So,
all right.
we'll make that change. Will be, we're good with the mission. We're going to add one more goal and we've signed off on goals and the underlying objectives 2, 3, and 4, which will become 3, 4, and 5, I guess, once you add a new one.
Yeah, thank you. Sometimes these conversations can seem kind of esoteric, so
Can seem what?
kind of esoteric. when
Oh,
you-
yeah,
you know,
no,
but-
I think it's important.
Yeah.
Words matter. Okay, so now we'll go on to the department lists, yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so the first one in the packet, I'll just go by packet order, is the city manager's office. So I don't plan to go through them all, and I mean,
Yes,
I'm
good.
happy to talk about anyone that you want to talk about, but I'm just going to focus on the ones that are listed as new. And
So,
then,
so are we looking at, so the blue sheets are the actuals from this past year, right? And now we're moving on to the
yes,
colored sheets with, okay.
yeah.
So so the blue sheets are kind of for our reference for what was done in the last 12 months or something.
Yeah, I think the most relevance of the blue sheets, beyond just informing the council how staff generally spend their time, is at the very bottom line is remaining full-time equivalent time before projects. So in other words, you can think of it, that's like the new project and program time, that 9% that you saw on that pie chart. So it ties directly into these project sheets. You'll see in the bottom in the red, or right above the red, there's the like available FTE. And so in case anyone's not familiar, basically how we put these together is we have all these existing projects and some new projects that were added through the year that are in red. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the priority given to them is either green, yellow, or red, based on just green is the highest priority, yellow is the middle priority, and red is the lowest priority. And the strategic goals, at least as they were written in 24, 25, are there, and that shows you which goals those projects are intended to meet in those columns. And then the status has the current status of the project. There's a new column there for multi-year project, just to indicate if this is expected to be done in 1 year, or if it's expected to be done over a couple years. That's another, there's that column. And then the percent complete at the end of this current fiscal year. This is anticipated percent complete. That's the green status bar, and you see in that one column. As
I
well
just want to
as,
make sure everybody's on the same page here. We're looking at these colored spreadsheet ones.
yes.
Yeah.
yeah. Apologies if I skipped ahead there.
No, it's all good.
Um,
So we're on the city manager's one right now, which is the first one in the packet.
yeah. Yeah, it should. Right. Yeah, it looks like this.
It's blue. It says city managers. I thought I was on the right page.
Right. I know. I apologize.
Yeah, there's all these tables, but yeah, the one that just shows like the staff time categories, that's the really just, I mean, like I said, it rolls up to how much time is available. And it's not an exact science, but it gives you a pretty good ballpark for what it would look like. So getting back to the city manager's department, the table with the different projects in red, yellow, and green. So finally, in the far right column, there's an estimated FTE, and this is based on, so the department heads in each department will say, well, this project is either a large, based on what they know about the project, how much of a level of effort they think it will be. And that's an estimate of time, of how much time it would take to accomplish those. You'll see that some of them are now 0 because they're expected to be 100% complete at the end of the fiscal year. So if you follow it over, it says 0, that's just because the time's already been spent at the end of the fiscal year. We don't expect to be planning for that time in the future. All right, so in the middle of the table, in that one column labeled status, there are some new ones. They're in bold. They say new. And I'll just run through what those are. And then I'll stop and I'd be happy to answer any questions on either those or any of the other ones. So the first is develop and implement an IT system master plan. So this would be a project in conjunction with administrative services. What this is about is we have Microsoft 365 and other software tools, and some things like public records requests, for example, have gotten very onerous and time consuming. And so looking at ways to both deal with some very specific circumstances like that, but also more generally, like how do we get records out of our system in a very efficient manner? If you look at Microsoft 365, there's, I don't know, like 20 different options you can get in there and use under the subscription. But we don't want everybody using all the different products because we want to know, we want to basically want to standardize on what the organization uses as far as programs. We've been using it for a couple of years. It's time to have that conversation. What tools are we going to use to communicate? What tools are we using for word processing? What are we using for spreadsheets? What are we using for file server, kind of file server space? So basically looking at that master plan and coming to a conclusion on what those products will be, the other ones we won't use as an organization. It'll feed into the artificial intelligence, the generative artificial intelligence conversation we're also starting to have internally. So kind of getting all those, kind of herding all the cats and getting them all tightened up and buttoned down. So that's what that project is. Vehicle asset tracking, with our asset management system that we now have in place. And by the way, we've been getting, the public knows about it. We've been getting public requests for repairs and things. This is the online asset system. So that's great. But also adding our vehicles, this is fleet. So adding our fleet vehicles to it and getting them tracked. So kind of you'll see in this department, some of them are kind of more inward facing, but some of them are also external. The barn, the Fleddy barn. So once we're done with the schematic designs this year, we plan to kind of take it on the road, so to speak, and try to raise awareness about that and hopefully raise money for it. We have a bunch of ongoing service contracts. So think of things like, landscape maintenance, janitorial. It's been a bit since we've put those all out to bid. So it's time to kind of get those contracts refreshed. And that's a, significant level of effort to get those things done. I do expect to be starting MOU negotiations during this 2-year period. So, I mean, think of it as, you're not just looking 1 year, we're looking at potentially 2 years ahead. So we are going to be starting that. We have an accessibility plan that we need to get going on. We do plan to refresh the website. It's kind of getting a little stale now, so we need to update that. And in proposing to explore these different tax increment financing districts. So those are the ones that were shown in green as new. And then there's one that's in yellow, which is priority 2, which is an update to the city council rules. It's been a bit since we've looked through those, and just good opportunity, new council, to look through them and see if there's anything that we want to adjust. And I think that's it, but I'll just pause there, see if there's questions or direction on projects or whatever.
Councilmember Sparks.
Just had 2 questions. Are the green, yellow, red meant to correspond with the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3?
Yes.
Should it be that then the 120 East Cotati ought to be in the green tier, since housing was sort of our top priority?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think, right. Yes. It's moving to entitlement, but there could be a little bit of overlap with just the development agreement on the back end, but yeah, good point.
And then one other question was the proposed tobacco sales policy. Would that fall under the city manager's office or community development?
It would be a joint thing, but it would probably be led by the manager's office, yeah.
Okay, I would propose adding that to the list.
Yeah, me too. I feel like that's the map is a little embarrassing, and it's maybe a ripe opportunity to draw on our new agreement with Rohnert Park and Sonoma State, because it affects them, and they're the other red community on this map. So we ought to just do something jointly, I think. Go ahead.
Okay.
And it seems that there are model ordinances already available, so it should help lessen the workload on that also.
So I suppose part of the work is figuring out, okay, if we pass the ordinance, then what infrastructure do we have to have in place to enforce and things like that? So
That's the main,
Yeah,
that's really the main thing, the main consideration, like with the secondhand smoke ordinance and with something like this, just how would it actually get enforced?
Right.
That's the main thing.
okay, but I would agree with adding that to the list. I think that needs to get done this year. Any other questions or comments about the city manager's office list? Anything that you feel is in the wrong color, or?
The question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Like some of the new items where the green and the yellow, or some of the, are they prioritized in a certain way within their
No,
areas?
no. Not, I mean, in terms of their order in rows, no.
Mhm. Okay. Okay.
And if I'm reading it right, as you currently show the accounting, there's room in your expected available FTE to cover the levels 2 and 3 projects. All right, in 25, 26, you show, oh no,
Yeah,
no,
yeah,
it's 0.9, let's see.
0.53, yeah. Yep, I mean, it'd be pretty much at capacity, but it should be doable, yeah. Well, that's level 1, actually, I'm sorry. Right.
Yeah, I'm a little confused that, the 25, 26 little listing there says priority 1 FTE, and 26, 27 says priority 2 and 3 FTE.
Yeah, it's just the way we ended up grouping them. We can group them differently, but basically
Oh, I see.
the first one is grouped just level 1, right? So as far as the green ones, green priorities, it's 0.53 out of 0.72 available. Right, so there is excess capacity above the level 1 ones, level 1 priorities. If you included level 2 and 3, I mean, perhaps just for ease of discussion, it should have been a level 2 and a level 3 separately accounted for so that you could just easily see. But
Right. So if this accounting was exact, which we know it's not, then this is implying that in the first year, there's roughly enough time in your office available to do 0.19 of the level 2 projects.
Yeah.
Like we
right.
could get that far down into level 2 and then if these are the only projects, well, we already added one, but
Yeah. Right.
if these were the only projects, then over the 2 years, you would be able to do all of levels 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question. Senior programs or services, would that be under city manager or a different area?
You'd be city manager with working in collaboration with the rec, but it's all part of the same department as far as this is concerned.
Okay, if it's not on there, I'd like to have it on there in some format, even if it's in collaboration with like an agencies. And I know that we might be receiving a report soon, so I think I'd like to add that on there.
Okay, other discussions, Councilmember Sparks?
Yeah, I propose removing a few things. One, I noticed the generative AI, I think is in probably the right priority area, and it sort of encompasses social media within it. So we could probably take, social media shows up in the green in a separate place. So yeah, I'm on the city manager's office list of projects. If you go about halfway down the green area, it says update social media policy. And then if you go 2/3 of the way down, develop policy in yellow, generative AI, AI pilot, and social media. So we've kind of got social media in there twice, and I think it's okay for it to be in the yellow area. So I'd propose just removing that green line one. And then we had discussed at the bottom of the yellow, we had previously discussed exploring the youth council. And we had said we would kind of push the discussion off to strategic planning. So here we are. So I think we ought to talk about whether that's something we actually want to do or not. Personally, I would like to see a more broad goal, a broad item that's explore opportunities for volunteer engagement. Is that something that's come up several times, and then explore ways to promote community events? Like we had talked about the idea of a toolkit for people who want to put on an event within their neighborhood. So I'd like to see a couple things like that on here. I'm not sure about the youth council. I'm kind of open to it, but I don't know if we ever had a full discussion on whether to include it as an actual project on this list.
Is recreation included in this, or is there a separate table for recreation?
This includes recreation.
Okay. Okay, thanks. Vice Mayor Lemus.
Yeah, I'm kind of wondering if the Pathways program that we're involved with kind of is in line with some of the youth council where people can learn more about city council service.
I think it's maybe a slightly different focus. It's very, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but more focused on adults who are looking to step leadership roles. Whereas I think the youth council is more directed towards teenagers.
I mean, I'd say it generally falls into the kind of the community, like collaborate, I'm forgetting the word right now, but basically community collaboration. I think it falls under the general umbrella, but it's different focuses within that sort of broader category. So like a youth council would be, as I understand it, it would be looking to bring like youth people and expose them to government, whereas the leadership is adults. I mean, I think almost exclusively are adults. So it's a little bit of a different demographic, but it's, similar maybe objective at the end. Raising awareness and hopefully getting people involved in leadership, and more broadly in the umbrella of volunteer opportunities or the event, like the event toolkit for neighborhoods or those kind of things. I think they all can fall in a kind of a larger bucket, but maybe one's more of like a grow leadership bucket and one's a community volunteer collaboration type focus.
Vice Mayor Lemus.
I'm still interested in kind of exposure for youth, even if it's college youth, to have exposure to city council. Some of the boards that I sit on have like board fellowships where young people, come in and we work with them so they can learn about sit with different board members to learn more about what it's like to serve on a board. So similarly, I'd be interested in still pursuing something along that. And I think I drafted, did I send you a draft for our youth council program? Maybe not.
I know we talked about it, but
Okay, talk.
I
about
mean,
it.
you know, we had the conversation here at council where you brought it up and you had generally,
Okay.
kind of gave me some general outlines, but I don't
Mhm.
think I've seen anything more specific yet.
Okay.
I kind of like the idea of a sort of bigger bucket item that's something about that could encompass, I think, both of those things. It's something about explore entry-level city service opportunities. You know, it's volunteer opportunities that could include youth council kind of work. Because I do feel like our sort of pipeline for city service doesn't have a lot of entry points. And I know when Cotati Creek Critters was real active, a lot of people got involved that way, and some of them stuck around and got involved in much deeper ways. So I'd like to, what do people think about that? A sort of broader category that would encompass youth council volunteer opportunities. And I mean, I'm not sure if your work to create the leadership program is already in here, but that could fit in that same item and might require, you know, another couple hundreds of an FTE.
Yeah, I do like it. I like that idea, especially because I've heard out in the community a request for like more creek projects and things like that, you know, so that'd be a good kind of way. And even with the seniors, there's ways for people to volunteer. So I think that's a good idea.
Councilmember Harvey.
Well, some of what we had before, you know, was the CEC, the community engagement, you know, maybe some of these kind of activity things. And maybe there's now people that are kind of willing to volunteer. That was kind of disbanded because we couldn't get anyone to serve on it. But maybe now people are willing to kind of serve, and we can, you know, bring back some of these different things based upon community involvement.
So, you know, one option, right? And I don't know if that's the grouping that the council wants to go with. You know, you could do like, right, explore. And I didn't get the exact wording, but like exploring community engagement opportunities is a general bucket, which would be things like the neighborhood event toolkit, event grant that we already do, that we're piloting right now, right? Volunteer opportunities such as the creek cleanup, senior volunteers, that kind of thing. And there's also, you know, leadership opportunities like the Pathways to Leadership that we're doing with Rohnert Park, Youth Council, that kind of thing.
I'm fine with that. And yeah, and I like phrasing the youth council as in the leadership opportunities category. You could put it in the other one, but I like putting it in leadership category.
Okay.
Not that it mattered.
Yeah, we used to have the, you know, honorary mayor, but that sort of fell by the wayside. And I think even when it was still running, the council at the time felt that they were kind of searching for a more engaging way to bring in people and interact with them.
Councilmember Sparks.
I just have a question because we've kind of encompassed senior volunteer opportunities into this, but Vice Mayor Lemus, it sounded to me like you were proposing a separate senior services.
We just, I feel like we have opportunities to engage our senior community through existing services already in place. I know that there was recently an update on the page that included some of that. But along with that, there's also maybe a push for more volunteers to do. There's something called I Ride Rohnert Park, I Ride Cotati. And there are seniors here that use it, where it's almost like a senior Uber, where people volunteer. And Cotati seniors are using the program. So I think one thing we could do is kind of look for more volunteers to participate in some of these existing programs. Yeah.
And I felt like the way that Damien phrased it, it's sort of broad enough to include that in that community engagement category, and with specific note that seniors are an important demographic to consider. Yeah. So what about the proposal so did you have like there's that update social media policy and later one that includes a policy on social media? Are those distinct things, or would it make sense to remove the separate update social media policy project?
I think when we do the generative AI policy, it could make sense to bring the social media policy back just to the council to review it and, or we'll review it. I'll have legal review it and then propose. any changes, if anything. And then it's been a while. I mean, and I think when Facebook was young, and actually young people still use Facebook, and it wasn't just like an older person's kind of social media app, we drafted that. And so things have changed. There's new apps in the world. And so it probably is. I mean, I agree. It's a good time to just take a look at it, make sure it's still relevant and does what it's supposed to do for us.
Well, I'm just seeing, this says that in this summer, we'll update the social media policy, and then in the fall, we're going to do the AI policy and social media policy. So I just don't want to revisit, like Councilmember Sparks said, we're not going to do the social media policy twice this year, I hope.
No, I just put them together in a single effort. And
Yeah, so I think her proposal was just remove the green update social media policy project. Does that make sense?
It makes sense.
Okay.
Yes.
And then we get 0.02 more FTE from that?
Yeah, but we already spent them on
Oh.
senior services and the tobacco sales policy, so.
Yeah, my hope is that when we come back, especially like for the general fund study session, we can clean this up with all the existing stuff that's going to be done by the end of the year, so you can just really see it more concise. It just so happens that we're not done with the year yet, and I just wanted to show everything. And so maybe it's a little busier than it needs to be, but anyway,
That's great.
once we get to the general fund update, I can just move all the ones that we plan to have done by the end of the year off of this. And so you're looking at a cleaner table.
I find the format really helpful. I think the spreadsheet is great. Like seeing what we've done in the completed column is great. Yeah, I like the format. Okay, we've dealt with, oh, sorry, one more on city manager? No? Okay, we've dealt with 7 FTE worth of work. We got something like 30 to go. So what's the next department?
Okay, community development. So I'm just, for the sake of brevity, because I don't know as much about it, I will just run through it, and then Noah is obviously here to answer any questions if it gets into details. I'm not best positioned to answer. So again, same drill as last time. If you look under the status column, you'll see where we are with what we proposed for some new projects. You'll see them bolded new. And so the first one on the list is the ADU, which is published grant information and types of funding support. So basically letting people know that are interested in building ADUs, where they can help hopefully finance these things. It's especially in existing neighborhoods, that's we've seen it be in Cotati a significant housing source over time. So that's what that is, the full electronic file management transition. So we're in the midst of an electronic file transition, and we're going to continue that. The plan is to continue that next year, so there'll be more of that next year. And so at that point, hopefully we'll be fully digital, and aside from making it work more efficiently for us internally, it also makes when the public is requesting records much more efficient to deliver those records to people. These days, almost nobody asks for a written record anyway. They almost always ask for it electronically. New state housing legislation implementation. So that's a bit of a catch-all bucket. We don't know what that is, but we know there's going to be something because they're continually working at it. And something, just as an aside, something I wish the state would work on is funding sources for housing, because we, as you all know, we have plenty of housing projects come through and get entitled, but they don't get built. So it'd be great if the state had some zero or low cost financing for housing if they're really serious about getting housing built. But in the meantime, we're just continuing to hammer away at the at ordinances and tweaks. Cultural and community event promotion. So this gets to some of what we've talked about already, streamlining those so that for community engagement, getting people together. Community development has a significant role in that process internally. So that's, they would be continuing to work on making sure that it's as easy as possible for people to do things. Implement existing business outreach program. So we have an existing outreach program, but it's been it's been at a much slower pace lately, but sort of tying into both the changes that the council's made around housing, but also more generally economic development. I think it's good to get out there and start seeing what, where the pain points are for businesses, how we can help them, connect them with resources and so forth. And more specifically along that, there's some things that we've talked about before that were about, some code improvements to potentially help certain types of businesses get up and running with less kind of, less hurdles. And one is the potential for, and these are potential ordinances that we can talk about, a pop-up business ordinance, an ordinance update on commercial land use tables, targeting specific business types. So we could look at, if there's certain business types we want to encourage, looking at those in our land use tables. Create a freeway-oriented zoning overlay. And so earlier we talked about the industrial area. That's what that's, I think, specifically targeting there, to try to open up some different types of, in particular, like retail along the freeway. And then a food-based business ordinance. And as the council well knows, there's been a lot of, in recent years, there's been a lot of movement on food-based legislation. And so there's a lot of things out there, from the sidewalk vending through cottage, through micro home enterprise, all the way up to a full brick and mortar business. Also mobile food vending, like a food truck. So there's a lot out there, and they've been sort of coming in piecemeal, partly from state legislation, partly from the county opting in. But at a staff level, we felt it'd be a good time to take a holistic look at that whole spectrum of new business creation from the very start in the food industry, all the way up to, hopefully a brick and mortar at the end of that rainbow, for that spectrum. And then with the website update that was mentioned earlier, business-focused website improvements. And then Market Cotati's policy improvements to housing developers and property owners. So as you all know, we've done a lot to really try to get the kind of housing that we want in this community going. And I just don't think people know about it. So we want to get out there and let people know about it. Electronic permit management implementation. So we're, this is basically submittal of plans and routing. So it's just another way for, just to make it easier for people that are submitting for building permits all the way up to development plans to submit electronically 24/7. And then it gives them, these kind of systems can give real-time feedback on where it is in the process. But this also would go hand in hand with, checklists that we're also finishing up right now, so that anyone that walks through the door knows exactly what they need to provide and, what the timelines and turnarounds are for everything. So we're trying to make sure everything is transparent and dependable, reliable. If we go on the road to tell everyone how great we are, because we are great, we want to make sure that everything's lined up on the back end administratively, so that we can follow up on what we tell people. And then there's a code update for the fee deferral. So there was a change in fee deferrals. I'm talking impact fees that has been implemented in recent state law. And so we need to update our ordinances to make sure that it falls in line with that. And then just continuing to implement, I'm down in the yellow now, continuing to implement the active transportation plan projects in the policy, and update our self-facility ordinance. So there's a couple things that came up with our first application that we thought could use another look. One is just making sure it's explicit that we require FCC reports as part of the initial application, rather than just have it be more informal part. And then, have some post-install measurements and potentially separation requirements just more explicitly baked into it. Continue habitat conservation plan development. So this is a county-wide effort. They're trying to develop an HCP. So right now we're just under sort of interim rules for things like tiger salamander and other endangered and threatened species. And so the habitat conservation plan is a formal way to look at all of that and formally designate areas as conservation areas. And it'll just bring, so like I said, the county's leading it because the county has to lead it because it's countywide. It's not just a Cotati thing. And it's probably it's definitely a multi-year process. It could be, even as long as 10 years based on what we've seen in other communities in the state. But at the end of that, if the county is successful in doing the HCP, it just provides a lot of clarity on which areas are really important to be preserved and which ones are, like infill and are good for development as opposed to this interim state that we're all in. Continue community awareness programming for decarbonization opportunities like the climate fair that we're holding in March. And there's other opportunities like that. We have an e-newsletter that we're doing, but continuing to build on that. And not just what we're doing, but opportunities for people that they can take advantage of in their own homes. Explore and implement opportunities to improve government efficiency using AI. So there's, in some ways we're already kind of using it. Because, like, for example, there's a solar plan checking app that we use already that people submit plans for solar and it just goes in and is checked by AI and the permit's issued. Like, nobody even looks at the thing. So there's, as AI continues to develop, there's going to be, as long as it's an appropriate use, there's going to be some areas like that where it can be a real efficiency time saver. And, we definitely see, in addition to community development, some focus like initial reviews of plans. That'd be a good opportunity potentially, but there's things out there. And I guess the larger point is that, starting to explore what those are and how they might be helpful tools to just be more efficient and at the end of the day, provide better service to customers. And I'll just ask Noah if there's anything I missed that you want to add on. Otherwise, that's it for me right now.
No, the couple highlights I would point out are, a lot of the items listed in community developments are, the amount of staff time that we could dedicate to it are, we could do a tenth of an FTE or frankly, a whole full-time position, like the marketing effort and some of these other things. I mean, it's obviously we have to commit resources based on their availability, but just know that there's a wide spectrum of what we could do under some of these options. And so some of the feedback we'd hope from the council would be not just kind of where they are on the list, and you're talking about prioritization. Just when we hear how important it is to you, we're also going to think about maybe how much resource to dedicate to it. And then that will help us polish these numbers up a little bit when we come back with the full budget. And then the other thing is just the location, like the habitat conservation plan, that's an ongoing one. So I would probably bump it up into the green in that because we're already committed to it as a part of this year. We don't want to pull out of that now. So just know that is a commitment that we're in this year. And we think it's important to stick with that at least until the county gets a little bit of certainty behind themselves as to where it's going to actually fall. A lot of the changes at the federal government right now are affecting that process. So there's a chance that we could start pumping the brakes on it, but we definitely don't want to completely back burner it when we need to throw some resources at it, because as we get the attention of these larger agencies, we have to be able to kind of jump through these limited windows to be able to get progress made on it. So just those are a couple of things I would highlight.
And one quick question about that last one, the habitat conservation plan. It's on there twice, once in green and once down in red. And I wonder if that was intended as like the first one, engage with county on habitat conservation plan development, which has 0.08 allocated to it for this year. It's the same amount allocated in the other one. I wonder if that's duplication or if it was like anticipated this year and anticipated next year.
I think it is. Well, it sounds like Damien added it to anticipate the ongoing nature of it. So if it's in the green, then we're fine for this year's budget. And I'm sorry, there's one other thing. Exploring potential short-term rental ordinance is also on this list. Damien skipped over it accidentally, I believe, when he was highlighting the items. Just know that is also on here, something for the council to provide feedback on as the discussion goes.
Yeah, thank you, Noah. Yeah, on that question, Mayor, too, the one in the red, so it was basically what happened was there's a multi-year project column that was added, and it was in both until we decided it'd be better just to put a multi-year column. And then that was just forgotten, the one in the red. So just, you can look at it, just the green one, so you can strike out the one in the red.
Okay, I got it. That makes
Is it the
sense.
same FTE or there's no difference?
They each say
0.08,
0.08, and I think we're being told we can cross out the first line in red.
Okay.
Yeah. So comments or discussion about this department priority list? Councilmember Sparks.
Hi, thanks. I had one question and then some comments. So my question was the continued community awareness programming for decarbonization opportunities. Is that the newsletter that was kind of brought forward by staff who were really passionate about that issue?
That's correct. And
Okay.
they've done a lot of other things. We've hosted kind of events run by Bayrin and Sonoma Clean Power. So just, we have some really passionate staff members
Yeah.
about sustainability. And so I'm trying to work that into their work plans and the things they do. The climate fair, that's 100% their idea. You know, they've really been pushing that, and we see it as aligned with the council goals. So that's something we want to continue to allow their interests to kind of percolate up into some of our actions in the department.
Okay, thank you. So I had a few comments. One is on that item. I'm fully supportive when you have talented and passionate staff on respecting their contribution. And so I would be supportive of bumping that up higher, you know, if that's something that people really are passionate about and it does align with our goals. I'd like to encourage people to bring their whole selves and their initiative and to their work. So I would like to just support our staff and bump that higher. In terms of the vacation rental ordinance, I'm a little bit skeptical about that right now. It seems like, you know, when you look at the boxes that it checks, and I appreciate having that, it's helping with our city finances in terms of generating revenue, but it might run counter to our housing goals in terms of, I would really want to know more about it in terms of what's the vision for that? How limited is it? Before dumping a lot of staff time into bringing a proposal forward. So I'm kind of skeptical of that one. And then my last one is I would really like to look at that item that's the last one in yellow. Update self-facility ordinance to require FCC report and post installation measurements and potentially residential. I think getting the requirement that they submit the FCC report is absolutely critical and time sensitive because we're going to be seeing more of these. So if I support the broader goals in that one, but if it's going to fall down the list and we're not going to get to it for a while, I would want to separate out the requirement for the FCC report and just do that right away because that's going to take, I don't know, not much time. I don't think to add that in, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We could potentially just create a telecom facility checklist on internal document, not even have to change the ordinance and just do it. So I'm also looking at other ways to address some of these other than kind of some of the more laborious kind of ordinance processes. And the dark sky ordinance is another idea where we've already started requiring dark sky compliant fixtures on our conditions of approval. So it's a way to get there without some of the other kind of more labor intensive
Public
work.
hearings and
Yeah,
everything.
exactly.
Yeah.
So just know, absolutely, as you prioritize these things, we'll look for ways to do it both formally if need be, or efficiently if we can just kind of do it quickly and get it implemented right away.
I just want to see like that we were lucky that T-Mobile was willing to voluntarily hand us over that report, but I want it to be legally required because I think it's so important for our ability to communicate with the residents about the safety of these antennas going in. I think that needs to happen top of the list.
Just a
Congressman
couple
Abbott.
comments following on the vacation rental. Are we vulnerable not having a current good ordinance?
Our ordinance currently just prohibits it.
It's a mint.
Yeah.
Okay. I just didn't know if that's the best scenario or should we develop one that does align with our housing goals? I know some communities are doing creative things now, limiting the number of days a year and all these various things. So again, not a big work time we want to involve to it, but I don't know if we have any risk there or what the upside with revenue would be if we had a model that, you know, did align with our housing project. And I guess, are any of these other initiatives more impactful from a revenue standpoint, like the business-oriented code improvements? Would addressing those issues open up any potential revenue streams for us? Or are there any others that you think if we moved on sooner than later, we would enhance revenues any materially way?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think some of them, it's a balance between taking a long game approach where, you know, making the changes, setting the table for somebody to show up with the right type of business that could then start driving some economic activity, whether it's bringing more visitors to town that then use all the other businesses and just drive up taxes generally, or is like a revenue heavy type of business that just drives taxes in their own. It's hard to quantify whether, you know, we go through this process, we're marketing ourselves, we set the table with the code, and then we happen to run into somebody who's just interested in expanding and they have the right property and the building's there and that happens, or if it's more of a long-term kind of approach and strategy that over time will likely drive up revenue. And I think it's going to be more the latter, with the chance of the short-term thing happening once we set the table.
And John, I'd also add to that, I'm sorry, Councilmember Savage. Sorry, new role tonight. I would say in general, the answer to that question is it's kind of a long-term approach, a long-term vision to building over time. It's rare that you get like a single business, for example, that will come in and just generate a lot of revenue. From a strategic standpoint, the way the city has been approaching it is both, you know, on the short term end of things, we're looking at things that are new revenue sources. So such as like TOT or cannabis business, or the new sale, you know, the additional sales tax that was approved by the voters. So there's that, which is significant, like new revenue, because it didn't exist as a revenue stream before at all. You know, sort of hand in hand with that is making sure that, you know, we're running things as efficiently as possible. We're not losing money on things as much as possible, right? So that we just run an efficient operation.
Okay.
So that's like fundamentally, that was the kind of the start. And then you get into kind of like a midterm and long-term, you know, kind of horizon where you're looking at, you know, property taxes and sales taxes kind of slowly growing. I mean, I'm talking purely from a financial standpoint, slowly growing over time. I will say though that on the food side of things, there's considerations beyond just revenue. And so there's, you know, in a lot of ways, the food business is very, it's a very big industry in Sonoma County, and it's, you know, people relate to it. It's a very centered industry here. So I think, you know, the food ordinance type work, and in addition to the, you know, maybe mid to long-term financial impacts it could have, it can just bring more sort of vibrancy, I guess, into the community when you have more small businesses starting up and just providing new types of food that maybe people hadn't, you know, had before. So, so definitely part of it. I mean, looking at it from a purely financial standpoint, there's kind of a spectrum of things, but there also are some other sort of benefits to the community.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, it might be in here and I'm just not seeing it, about the ordinances around electrification of homes. I know the Regional Climate Protection Agency has kind of been working on different ordinances on that. Is that already covered in here somewhere, or is it something we need to put on here?
Yeah, so I would have it fall under the sustainability, a kind of broader topic.
Okay.
And then specifically regarding an ordinance to like mandate electrification, I still have not seen a legal pathway that addresses the Berkeley case. So that's why we definitely are keeping that on, you know, in the back of our mind and looking for opportunities. So I would say it falls under that category. And right now we don't have a clear path to that exact requirement.
Yeah, since we're doing a 2-year budget, I just didn't want to, you know, kind of lose sight of that if they come through, because I know that staff is continuing to work on that. But yeah, finding that pathway or that narrow pathway, we just don't know when that's going to happen. So, okay.
So when you said under the broader sustainability, you mean the goal, or does it fit in with one of the projects that's currently on the spreadsheet? Like, or were you saying if a path becomes available, you would have to add it to the work list? It doesn't fit in one of these now.
So I say, I would say keeping track of the item falls under the sustainability project. And then if we need to undertake a specific ordinance, it would be added to the list, but under that kind of category.
Where is the sustainability project? Sorry.
Continue community awareness programming for decarbonization opportunities. So that's
Oh,
the
I see.
second list in the red.
Got it. Got it.
And just, I mean, just one example is we're part of a statewide monthly meeting group where all the sustainability folks in the whole state get together. We talk about these types of issues. We talk about opportunities. We meet regionally with Bay Area folks, Bay Rin, and then also some of the county wide. So we're actively engaged in these communities at every level, looking for opportunities and programs and grant funds for whether it's ourselves, our community members, all those types of things.
Great. Thanks.
And I
More?
believe there was a suggestion to move that up to green, that particular one earlier.
Yeah, right. Yes, we'll come back to all these suggestions after everybody's had a shot. Talk, Councilmember Sparks.
Thank you. And thank you for remembering and bringing that up, Councilmember Harvey. We used to have that as a line on here, and after the Berkeley decision, it's gone. So I would propose adding that separately as much like we have this street parking program if needed and have it on hold. Maybe just add a line that's building electrification ordinance if feasible and put it on hold. And then if that becomes feasible.
Does that work for you, Councilmember Harvey?
Yeah.
Sound good? Vice Mayor Lemus, did you have anything you wanted to comment on or ask about?
No, not on this one. Yeah, I think I'm good. Thank you.
I just had one comment about, as to Director Housh's point that there's a lot of, how much we emphasize a program will bring the FTE up and down. And I just wanted to comment that a couple of them that seem to have pretty high levels of FTE assigned to them right now that I would support reducing are the business outreach program at a quarter time. That's a large chunk of staff time. And the marketing policy improvements to housing developers and property owners. I mean, those sound like they're probably the same person doing that, similar roles, but given that we're over, we're 1.25 people short to accomplish just the level 1 stuff. I'm looking for places to cut. And there's a couple others where things that have been brought up by council indicate to me that maybe what's needed before devoting significant staff time is just a council discussion about, for instance, vacation rental ordinance. Do we have any interest in going there and thinking about, 20 days a year limit or something like that to enable people to rent their house out when they're going on vacation, which wouldn't take a unit off the market, for instance. But then we'd have to talk about, okay, how much revenue would that likely generate? Would it be enough to cover the enforcement we'd then be on the hook for? Things like that. So just a discussion about it prior to investing substantial staff time. I feel like there was one or two others along those lines. I'm not coming up with them right now. But I would support moving up the let's see, the community awareness program for decarb efforts, decarb opportunities, and the crucial immediate part of the cell facility ordinance, like Councilmember Sparks suggested. Any other feedback, discussion on this one? Okay, you got what you need? Okay. So can we move on to the next department? What are we doing next? Administrative services? Sorry, the city manager is still taking notes.
Yeah, thank you. So like last one, I'll run through them and then I'll have Angela add on anything I missed and feel free to ask any questions. So our administrative services, some stuff that's, again, just in the vein of continuing to try to provide more ways for people to engage with us and provide better customer service. Text to support is an option that we could pursue. This allows people to text about to admin services, about their utility billing. And maybe business licensing too, I'm not sure, but anyway, for some of the services we offer. There's, this actually came up from staff that we do like a cost savings award program, and not necessarily a financial thing, but like just recognizing employees that find things that we can do to save cost, you know, or do things more efficiently and save costs. So I thought that was great. I mean, I'm always encouraging people to look at better ways to do things. And if we can formally recognize them through some type of internal program, I think that'd be great. Because it seems like, you know, there's always a limited resource of money and staffing, but there's like unlimited things to do, you know, coming from the state or the federal government or whoever, you know. So we've been looking at our CalCard, that's our credit card, the city credit card, the purchasing process and in leveraging. So what that means is that there's a cashback, you know, kind of feature to the CalCard. And so you could use it for more city purchasing. Some of our vendors allow credit card based purchasing, and we could basically spend the same amount of money we're spending today on things, on purchases, but then get some cash back and then just use that basically as, I mean, you know, admittedly not a giant revenue source probably, but, you know, if we can convince some of our construction contractors to use it, then it could be real money, you know, so. Funding for water projects. So we have some, we're going to be talking more about our rate analysis next regular council meeting, and this will make more sense in that context, but basically looking for funding streams for some of our water projects. And then AP, that's accounts payable. It's basically the process where we, you know, to pay our bills. Some just process improvements to further streamline that. A donations program creation. I think this is more about, you know, people. Well, I'll let Angela talk more about that. I'm aware of it in a couple different contexts, but I want to speak, and she can speak on that one better than I can. And then we're looking at RFP, RFQ to contracts, process, review, and update. So we have it's basically internal streamlining of the process to go from RFP, RFQ to award to getting the contracts. A new business welcome resource. So this is something we've also been talking internally about for a while. So right now, for example, Angela and her department have been working on a new welcome to Cotati resident thing. So when someone comes in to sign up for a utility account, it's basically like, you know, here's all the things you need to know, you know, about the community. This is like both physical infrastructure, but also numbers to call. Do you have a question about garbage, like whatever, right? So that's something that we're working on right now. And we'd like to do something, I mean, it's a little different for businesses, but similar, like you have a new business come in, here's resources for you and just a welcome to Cotati kind of thing, just to make it more friendly. And then volunteer program support, and which we talked about a little bit tonight, and evaluating stormwater rate study. This is kind of this is probably below our baseline, but that's something that's, I guess, legally permissible. Is something we want to do? I don't know, you know, so. Angela, you want to talk about the donations or anything else that I didn't speak to?
No, I mean, I think it's really just bringing that to council of like the different ideas we've had discussions on, like what can we do to best fundraise for certain projects or things that we want to use, like the ranch, and how do we set it up for success going forward, and just really reviewing that, understanding it, and setting up a a policy or a standing, depending on what we come to as the best practice for managing donations, because it is a whole nother bandwidth of funds coming in with other implications of use of those funds. So you want to be a good trustee of those. So making we understand what we would get into before we go into asking for those funds from the community.
And I think just a tangible thing to keep in mind as we're talking about like the Rhonda Floody Ranch barn and potentially raising significant money for that, just making sure good policy for how that works. And it's, it's structured in a way that people actually want to donate. I think, people have different opinions about government. And so you want to have a structure that'll allow, hopefully to maximize our ability to get donations through that. And that's it. Happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Okay, great. And I'll point out that like the last department, even the priority 1 projects are a person above what we have staff to accomplish. So these won't all happen absent something else happening. So discussion about these priorities of projects. Councilmember Sparks.
I had a question about the allocation of 0.17 FTE for 2 different things, the CalCard purchasing evaluation and the donations program. It seems like in order for those to save us money long term, they really need to pan out and save us tens of thousands of dollars at least to be worth it. So I'm just sort of curious, what's your take on how likely it is that those are going to pay for themselves since they're only there to raise money or, yeah.
So the CalCard purchasing process is kind of a twofold. So first of all, there's a process part of it. CalCard now has actually developed a significant amount of effort into fixing their site and their portal to manage the cards to where they have everything within the site where each individual card holder can actually manage their own card rather than the admin services waiting for statements to come in and then we code everything and then we send it back to them to attach receipts and then we confirm the receipts match. So it's a time thing. It takes a lot of time to process credit cards for payments. And so leveraging that as a part of an efficiency where we can do a training where we can show everyone how to use the system effectively to attach their receipts and to code everything to their budget so that then we're just downloading it in order to pay it appropriately in the system. It will save a lot of time, more than that 0.17 FTE. I guarantee it. And then across multiple departments, because everybody has to deal with the CalCard process. And then again, we do expect to leverage it to get some funds in. I would like to see it grow as we become more competent with the process in the system and maybe engage with a couple of our contracts and go, this is our preferred choice for payment and we don't want to pay additional fees to you for this process. And so having that as a part of that negotiation piece of it, and knowing that we are efficient and effective in using the system, can get it paid out timely so it doesn't affect our credit, and then getting the points and money back in return for it could just make a benefit for us outlasting more than the 0.7 or 0.17 FTE. And again, I think that's a holistic cost. So I was kind of taking into time, my staff transitioning as well as them training other departments on how to use this and implement it, and then working with contracts to try and get it done. So it might be a little bit longer term, but that's where I am looking. The other 0.17 FTE you're looking at was the donations program, or so that is an estimate on time. This is not going to be solely my department, and this would just be my time, but I would be coordinating with Damien, so it might be more heavy on the time, depending on what we decide to implement. And so that again would be something probably more like what Noah was talking about, where it would probably be, a 0.05, where we're talking about what it's going to take before we bring it to you. And then if there's other things needed to implement it, it would take probably more time. So it would be something where we could take it in pieces as opposed to a lump sum, which was kind of proposed in here. It's like this, if you wanted this done today, this is the time it would take. Yeah.
Other questions or comments on this one? Okay, yeah, so if I understood you right, it perhaps even, let's see, when is the purchasing one? It has a TBD for date, but let's say you did it this, in 25, 26, you might anticipate having to devote less time to accounts payable. I assume that's in 26, 27.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
So maybe the 0.16 available for projects might grow in year 2.
That's what I would hope. Yes, I would see that our day-to-day time would be then used more for projects or other goals for the department or the city.
Great. Yeah, I didn't have any things that I wanted to push up or down. Councilmember Harvey.
Can I ask a question about the donations program? We don't have such a thing right now. And I know that we've discussed with the Veronda Fleddy Ranch that's one of the methods. Does that mean that until we do a program, we are precluded from taking any donations because we don't have the capability?
We do take donations, so the rec department does take donations and stuff, so their yard sale and such, they do take donations which go towards the camp programs and such. So we do that, and we've also built out donations for the canine program. So anyone who still wants to provide donations for those, we have a mechanism, we have the accounts to hold them, and we properly report for everything because we want to make sure we're the best holder of funds and we're doing our due diligence with all of those. However, when you're dealing with another level, that's not just trickle donations that come in due to events or one-time donations or even National Night Out, we get significant, contributions that fund parts of National Night Out. We just want to make sure we're good caretakers of those funds and also leveraging them in a way that makes the most benefit for that purpose. So, okay.
Thank you.
Any other comments on this one? All right. Do you have what you need? Okay, let's move on to the next one.
Yeah. Okay, so the next department is Public Works. And so this one, again, I'll go through the new projects, but just bear in mind that Public Works is very budget dependent, and we're not having that conversation tonight. And we're not having a budget conversation tonight. So just bear that in mind. These are sort of this is the aspirational list. And then when we come back for the general fund and the enterprise, then we'll be able to determine what's just aspirational, what actually can get funded. But this is what we're thinking right now. So the 2025 street improvements project is planned. We have the annual citywide street and pedestrian safety improvement project. As the council knows, we've been doing that every year, continuing that. Sewer and water renewal and replacement master plan. So just looking at updating that. The sewer collection renewal and replacement. So a lot of the sewer projects are largely anyway, we'll get into that when we start talking about capital projects, but basically renewals of the water and sewer systems. And then the lift station renewal, which is distinct from the collection system. And then the well 2 renewal and remediation. And when we say remediation, we mean like repairing basically. Cypress tank and pipeline. Councilmember Harvey's favorite project. And then as you know, there's a 2-year, so we have the 2027 streets and 2028 street projects. And the backup generator is still on there for the New Century lift station, or I guess that's the other one we haven't done yet. And then the gateway sign project, gateway signs project, those are the monument signs at the gateways. The annual landscaping improvements project that the council has recently added. And then the resurfacing of the Cater basketball court. the tennis / pickleball court out at Sunflower will be resurfaced as part of the park improvements plan for next year. So again, like I said, those are, as you can see, those are mostly capital projects, and it's going to hinge very much on where we are budget wise, but we'll know more. And Craig, did I leave anything out that you want to talk
Well, I'd
about?
just like to add, you're spot on with the funding. The water and sewer is really dependent on the outcome of the action on the water rate and sewer rate update that's coming up soon. And we've got a lot of park projects going on. The Putnam Phase 1 is now, but what's coming down the pipeline is the Sunflower with the $500,000 grant, and then out following that, the Civic Center. So that's a combined effort with the city manager's office where all the outreach and the design is being done, and then engineering delivers it. Okay. You'll see some projects on here that are described as on hold. And so that basically meant that funding was not available for those efforts, but they remain priority projects. And the default is to move that into the next funding year, 25, 26 or 26, 27, but they're still staying on the list. That's what that on hold means. Just something that didn't make it. We got that didn't make it on the list was this Safe Streets for All grant that we won. And so that's going to create Class 4 bike lane along Redwood Drive, and also an ADA transition plan. We have gone over the magical 50 employee limit. So now the state requirement is that we have an ADA transition plan. So that grant is going to 100% cover that cost. The renewal replacement master plans, we've never had one before. We've had capacity master plans, but now that our water wells and our lift stations are aging, they're 60 years old or so, some of those, it's really industry standard to do an assessment, a condition assessment of those systems, and then those assessments produce their own CIP, their own capital program lists. So that's what those a renewal replacement master plan would be. Those would be the first ones that we would do as a city. So that's what those ones are. I just wanted to add that.
Great, thanks. Comments, questions on this list? Councilmember Harvey.
So right now in the yellow are the well 1A and well 3 projects. That doesn't really leave us in a very good spot with our wells kind of out of service, and it does mean that we have to, as was said earlier, purchase the more expensive water from Sonoma Water. I'm concerned that they keep getting kind of pushed down, and we kind of do need them both from a managing expenses, but as well as from an emergency perspective. If they're out of service and we have an emergency, that could be a problem. So should we be moving those up a little higher?
Well, you'll see a theme here. We've been in a very reactive mode where we just in 2024, well 1A was out of service because one of the impeller broke. So we went out and bought one, and it took 2 to 3 months for it to arrive. And then lo and behold, a couple of weeks ago, well 3, the submersible pump broke, completely failed on us. And so we're in a very lengthy bidding process to try to get that replaced. And well 2, we've taken offline for scheduled R&R activity. So I'm personally done with being in reactive mode, and I want to switch to being in a proactive mode. And so what you will see with the upcoming rate study is funding that level. So we're not reacting to things breaking anymore. And then we have a very good asset management system that can predictively, tell us when useful lives are to be up. And so we can get in there and replace equipment before they fail on us. So it's a combination. It's mostly not having the enterprise systems funded at a level for us to be in a proactive mode. So we've been running our systems into the ground and paying the price for that, having our wells offline for longer periods of time. So we really want to get out what you'll see here in this plan and in the water rate study, which would be funding these projects, is moving from a reactive to a more proactive mode. That's a big step for us.
So does that mean we need to change the priority on these so that we can get them moving rather than them being on hold and in the yellow?
I will say, just so this particular one, I know we kind of went into more detail on those particular wells, but this particular line item is the filter media specifically. It's like a sand filter that, every 10 years or something you're supposed to replace. And so it's just on hold I think from a staff capacity standpoint at the moment, but it's not the broken things. So the broken things are something different. And we're trying to deal with that this year, at least with well 1A is operational. Well 3 has a broken pump, as you heard. And that pump I expect to be operational before the end of this current fiscal year and back. And so more long-term, Craig's talking about having a rate study that supports that a more proactive maintenance stance rather than, until things break and then you have to scramble and get them fixed. So, I think to your point, Councilmember Harvey, is that it would be good to, I would agree with you. I think it probably would be good to not call it on hold in this next 2-year budget. We should, plan on, replacing the filter media.
I think that becomes really pretty critical for us, especially as we see, fires that come down the line and we don't know, we could lose, some critical structure from Sonoma Water and our community would depend upon those wells. So I want to be sure that we're taking care of them properly and giving them, the right level of resource.
And if I'm hearing right, the most important resources when we talk about capital projects. So the staff time, I think if we provide the money to do the well repairs, the 0.03 staff time will happen. That's my prediction. I don't think Craig is going to not do the project because it's yellow.
We'll get it done.
Yeah, it's with infrastructure especially that kind of infrastructure, it's a priority. Yeah.
So in that regard, this list is kind of an odd discussion because the real money discussion is when we talk about capital projects. And if we decide to put money to one capital project, then the staff time for that will move up into green. Yeah.
I suppose really the real question on this particular department is there anything in particular, that the council sees as missing or, thinks is important for us to think about?
I'm not seeing anybody come up with anything.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things about public works and general infrastructure is it's also generally planned.
Right.
That's hard just to throw in a new project when you already have a multi-year plan. But
Right. And I really appreciate, Director Scott, your attempt to get the water and sewer system on the same footing you've been trying to get the streets on. Get out in front of it.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
I think we've already addressed this, but I remember there was some talk about developing a regular inspection program for all the park equipment. And are we doing that now? That's already achieved. We don't need to.
We are. Okay. And with our insurance provider, Sierra, they provided us paper copies, and we have created electronic form of that folds into our asset management program. So our staff go out and inspect on a biweekly basis using their tablet. It's very 21st century, and fills out these forms. And then if something is found to be deficient, they go ahead and press another button and it generates a work order to get it fixed. It's really pretty neat.
Great to hear. Okay.
And they only have to enter that once, not 6 times like the police do?
Correct.
Okay, good. All right,
All right.
I think we're ready for the next department? All right.
Okay, so last but not least is police. All right, so one of the, I will just, before we get into the couple of new things here, one of the things that's been sort of a challenge and we're trying to move away from it is historically in the police department, a lot of the things on here have been sort of operational things and not particularly priorities. It's kind of, so we're trying to, the next time you see this after tonight, following our conversation, hopefully we'll streamline this and actually make it really just projects as much as possible. So on the new projects, so core specialized training for the detective position. So we have a detective specialty assignment, and it never really had been delineated, what are the, like, I'm sure as you can imagine, there's a billion different trainings that a detective could go to, but we want to identify what the main ones are that we expect the detective to have. And that not only does that help, set a minimum baseline for the detective, it also helps us manage training costs if, they start chasing trainings that aren't aligned with what our primary goals are. The South County Safe Team and mental health outreach and expansion. So, the Safe Team continues to operate, well. We're, part of what's going on right now is we are, we have the 1-year funding agreement with the county through Measure O. We're just starting the conversation about a multi-year funding agreement with the county for Measure O. And sort of part and parcel with that is expanding partnerships potentially as well as we get into multi-year funding, and really trying to make it, at the end of the day, the point of this is to make the user experience more seamless so that, we have a safe team in Cotati, we have a safe team in Runner Park, and there's a safe team at SSU. But if you'd happen to, live in Pengrove or right across the city limit line, you're not served by the safe team, you're served by the county's MST team, which it just isn't a good service delivery model. So, we have been having conversations, but we need to get through some initial funding conversations to get to what does a South County Safe Team look like, so that no matter where you are kind of in the South County region, you call a number and a team comes and you don't care who's delivering it. It just provides a service. But on the back end, we've sorted all that out, And then the scanning project and digitization project. So that's, this is really true across all the departments, but this would be, a project that we're hoping to fund on the police side of the house. And so on the police side, there's, some records, a lot of the records are, in the consortium system, and that's already part of a record system, but there's other records that are housed locally, created and housed locally. So getting those in a digitized form and record system. So that takes, scanning and getting a contractor in most times. Otherwise, it'll take you forever, but changing your work processes as well to get those documents digital to begin with in the future. And then I will say that on right now we have a couple things on hold. One is the restricted hour parking ordinance in the industrial area. I think we're just waiting at this point because we haven't heard a lot of business complaints lately, I think is why. So that's just on hold. Yeah. And then the BOLA wrap it's just a tool, to like wrap people that were, aggressive. We had some tools deployed that were pilot testing, and after pilot testing them for several years, the consensus internally is that it's not the greatest thing. I mean, we have other tools, tools that are better than that, that are also, the term is less than lethal, but basically things like, there's a lot of other options like wraps, or potentially tasers or just other things that we could use. And then it just wasn't very effective, I think, is the main point. It just wasn't as effective as it needed to be a useful tool to train on and to have on your person. And then the lights on project, that was a vendor issue. I think hit a log jam with the vendor, and it's just been difficult to establish anything, I think. Yeah. I think, Chris, if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, just speaking to at least to the Lights On project, we found that it was, I've done quite a bit of research on them, and we were finding that folks don't like it on basically every end of the house. So law enforcement didn't like it because they were handing these vouchers out, and there was just a limited supply of them, and it was a pay to play from the city's standpoint, right? And the contribution that you had to make to the Lights On program was getting bigger and bigger. Especially if you weren't in Minnesota, they're Minnesota based. So out of state became problematic too, in terms of how well they would play with either out of state, especially California. Some of it became because of basically it was a $250 voucher. And if you have a taillight bulb out, that's one thing. But for most that have a broken taillight in most modern cars, $250 may fix your taillight or it may not. And we found people weren't even going in and cashing in on those vouchers because it was more money for them to actually fix the issue that this voucher was supposed to fix. And so that was contrary to what the whole project was supposed to be. And also it's dependent on automotive repair shops agreeing to do this as well. And Lights On was putting stipulations on them saying, well, if someone comes in with their broken taillight, you also are supposed to be obligated to help them with other aspects of their car. And then it became this sort of, well, are they gouging on one end? And then the customer that's coming in asking for all these things, they want their car fixed for free. And then going back to the police saying, hey, you're creating a bunch of problems for us on both ends. So I think systemically it became problematic. So looking at that and the costs associated with that on top of it, they became compounding in terms of problematic for at least in terms of us moving forward with that as a potential, avenue for community relations. And then when you actually peel back the onion further, there was really no hard evidence about the fact that it was actually helping with community relations, with policing at all, nor was it stopping police contact or lessening police contact. In fact, there were the advocates that were initially for Lights On were saying that it was actually increasing those contacts because the officers were then, at least the allegation was, the officers were looking for these broken taillights just so they could hand out vouchers. And then it was a matter of, well, who are they handing out the vouchers to and who are they issuing citations to? And then was there some sort of disparity between that and then trying to pull data about that where they, for example, were the officers issuing vouchers just to one sort of folk and then not another sort of folk? And then there was allegations about that. So it created another compounding issue. So it's a lot to digest about Lights On, but the punchline is that we're not moving forward with Lights On, and that's why it's on hold.
Questions or discussion on this list? Councilmember Harvey.
Chief, I have a question. I don't see anything in here about Prop 36 and how that's impacting the department. I know that a lot of the departments, because of Prop 36, they're kind of having to start from square one again. It's like a clean slate. Is there anything that you guys need to do or are going to do? Some agencies I know are like instructing to mark their reports Prop 36 so that they get different attention at the DA's office so they actually get prosecuted. Because the thing about Prop 36 is that someone could have been arrested 100 times for, breaking into the store, and they get like a clean slate because if they haven't been convicted, it's on convictions. So it's getting those convictions started so that the actual law that people voted into place actually starts happening. So
Yeah, so from a strategic project standpoint, there's nothing that we're doing regarding Prop 36
Okay.
specifically that would require, extra FTEs. A little training in terms of like anything else, like a legislative update. And there are some practices in place operationally that we are doing where on a due diligence side, our officers are making sure that, prior criminal history and all those things are going up to the packet, to the DA's office. But that's our usual bread and butter anyway. Anytime that we have somebody like that, any suspect, that part of their criminal history goes with that packet in addition to whatever the circumstances of that particular incident are. And then, anything that they have, whether it's 100 times they've been arrested and multiple thefts and that whole thing, that goes to the DA's office. And then the DA's office obviously has their own due diligence on their part. So the combination of that we're finding already is working. So yeah, I didn't find it, it's a good question. I just didn't find the need to carve it out as a specific strategic project for that purpose.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Others? Councilmember Sparks.
Sure. So I noticed that we've got a little bit of extra FTE in the current fiscal year. And I know that operationally, we just have to have a certain amount of staff to provide coverage. So sort of curious what your plan is to do with that extra slack there, or do you think it'll get eaten up by operational things?
I think the latter of what I don't know that I don't necessarily look at that ever as a, an extra something to do something with. I think it's just more about, then that's in partnership with the other departments too, and finding out kind of how that number as kind of, illusional as it is to some degree, what that actually plays out to in real world for us. I never look at it in terms of, and I know Angela wants to, but no. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say, it's an overall departmental estimate, but I think when you're dealing with departments, this is partially true in Public Works where they have a lot of, field staff relative to the staff in the office, and police who have like patrol and dispatch staff, and that's basically what they do all day long. And they can play a role in some of these things, but they're generally not leading any of these projects up. So the actual number of people doing a project, it could be, so it's a little bit, for those two departments in particular, police and Public Works, a little bit more, it's a little more off than the other departments just because of those reasons where you have a relatively large group of the department that really don't do projects, but they're built into this,
Vice Mayor Lemus.
Yes, I was just checking, Chief, if there's any space here or if it's included in the community outreach, where it says TPA, NNO, Coffee with a Cup, support of other kind of community programs or events. Is that included in that too, even though it's not spelled out?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not spelled out in the strategic projects here. But again, and you notice with the little chevron icon that a lot of these, like the city manager mentioned, are moving to these regular activities, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're not carving them out as strategic projects necessarily. But yeah, if you look at the last year, and I was just putting the final touches on the annual report, we had over 35 plus different events and activities that we were involved in that, that aren't necessarily even police related, right? In fact, most of them aren't, right? But it's about having that interaction with the community on different fronts. And even in 2024, all the different, it's more about just putting that on the list. And anyone that lets me know that we don't otherwise have that on the list, we're on the calendar and trying to make it happen so we can have staff there and have a presence there and have those interactions. So yeah, that's to us, that's part of our regular activity. We log it as such, we bill it as such, all of it.
What's appreciated by the community. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, a lot of those ongoing things, you'll see them start migrating off of this particular project list and into other, like he mentioned, the annual report. You'll see it, here's all the things we're doing, and that's an opportunity. Especially if the council knows of a community activity that maybe we don't know about. You don't have to wait for that, but you can always bring it up during the year if something comes up. But it'll be a snapshot of everything that happened in the year. Yeah.
Great. My only question was about, you have staff time assigned to these on hold projects, which in the description sounded like we weren't pursuing them. So I wonder, is that really are you really going to spend 0.08 on things that we're not, on the industrial area?
I would just say that it's been in the previous work plans. So we didn't want to just say zip, we wanted to present it to the council and get their input before we do that.
Yeah, it seems it. Oops, sorry. Different departments use on hold slightly differently. Some people mean, yeah, we're not actually pursuing this anymore. And some people mean we haven't gotten to it yet. So that might be helpful just internally to think about, what do we mean by on hold? Does that mean something we're proposing the council take off the list? Or does it mean we'll get to it sometime, we're just not sure when? So, but I don't have any other comments on this list. Councilmember Sparks.
Yeah, just to your point about those, I'd be in favor of removing the BOLA wrap and the lights on project since we've heard, I'm supportive of the chief's rationale for not pursuing those.
Yeah, me too. Everybody's nodding. There was a third one though. What about the, so that industrial area restricted parking ordinance, are we not pursuing that at all or just not yet?
It had been, so that one had been on hold because initially there were some issues that we were trying to address and it seemed to have subsided. I mean, the chief now hasn't had any experiences that have warranted, spending the staff time on it.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
So should we just remove that from the list then? And you'll bring it back if it ever is an issue and we need to,
Yeah, I'm fine with that as well.
Yeah.
sound good? Yeah, great. But then you'll have like 5 things on next year's list if you move all these ongoing things up. We'll have to come up with some more
Gonna
projects.
make my
for you to
job
do.
easier. What are?
No, we'll come up with more. Don't worry. Okay. All right, that was the last department. Is there anything more you need from us on this?
No, I don't think so. I will, I appreciate it. It's very helpful. I will, I'll come back at our general fund study session with, updated, goals and objectives that we talked about, an update to the, vision that we also mentioned. And updates to each one of those, project lists for each department. And, my hope is that, for the next version, a lot of the stuff that we plan to be done with at the end of the year will just be moved off into a separate list and not in this list so that you can see clearly what the plan is for the next 2 years.
Great.
Yep.
Okay, anything more from council? Okay, was there information received after the agenda was posted?
Not for this packet. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And with that, we're adjourned at what, 9:08 or something.